Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
The sound was like the call of death itself, chilling everyone to the bone and extinguishing any flicker of hope in their hearts. Ahead, a horde of terrifying zombies seemed to awaken, letting out ferocious snarls as their bloodshot eyes gleamed with a ravenous hunger. Among them, Bulldozer stood out, his expression disturbingly ecstatic. Boss really outdid himself today, an all-you-can-eat buffet with over 200 dishes on the menu. Roar! With a guttural howl, Bulldozer charged forward, leading his gang as they barreled into the crowd like a wrecking ball. Screams and cries of despair erupted as people scattered in every direction, desperate to escape. But the zombies were relentless, tackling them one by one, pinning them to the ground, and tearing into their flesh. The scene descended into utter chaos. The moment the doors were opened, humanity had already stepped into the abyss. Marcus felt a wave of despair crash over him. He was completely drained, his mental energy spent, leaving him powerless to resist. Only now did he fully understand. It was this very group of highly trained zombies that had overrun the prison and killed Alex. And now, Ethan had risen to become the Zombie King. A Zombie King with the power of absolute domain. A force so overwhelming it was practically invincible. How can humanity possibly survive this? This was Marcus's final thought before death claimed him. A searing pain tore through his body as Laura ripped him open, gutting him without hesitation. Once the Genesis Biotech team was wiped out, the remaining survivors, ordinary people, stood no chance. They fell one after another, their futile resistance crushed, their bodies devoured by the ravenous undead. This was the true apocalypse, a world drenched in blood and slaughter, leaving nothing but helplessness and despair in its wake. Before long, the screams of the living faded into silence, replaced by the grotesque sounds of zombies feasting on flesh. The entire mall was overrun. Not a single soul survived. Ethan's expression remained cold and detached as he turned and began walking away. Behind him, Bulldozer, Laura, and the others followed obediently, their movements precise and disciplined. It's time to head back. After killing Marcus and his group, Ethan obtained 5 crystal cores. He consumed 3 of them, feeling a surge of power coursing through him. It was as if he was once again on the verge of evolution. However, the energy from the 3 cores was immense and would take time to fully absorb. For now, he decided to hold onto the remaining 2. On the way back, the sky began to lighten. In the world before the apocalypse, this would have been a bright, hopeful morning, with the sun rising to greet a new day. But now, all that lay before him was devastation. Corpses littered the streets. The entire city was a ruin. Ethan led his zombie followers through an abandoned city park. A broken swing creaked softly in the breeze. Rusted benches were stained with dried blood, and the air was thick with the stench of decay and death. Scattered zombies wandered aimlessly through the park. Some of them, eerily enough, seemed to be stuck in the routines of their former lives, their actions mechanical and hauntingly repetitive. An elderly man, dressed in a faded tracksuit, stood stiffly in the middle of a dilapidated basketball court. His hands clutched a cracked basketball as he tried to shoot it into the hoop. His movements were slow and jerky, and the ball slipped from his grasp, rolling to the ground. Yet he seemed oblivious, continuing to mimic the motion of shooting over and over again. Not far away, an old woman staggered along a cracked pathway, pushing a rusted baby stroller. Her steps were unsteady, and the wheels screeched with every turn. She seemed trapped in an endless loop, walking the same path again and again. Ethan glanced over. Inside the stroller was a massive rat, its claws clutching something unrecognizable as it gnawed on it with relish. Before long, a few young zombies appeared up ahead. Unlike the stiff, mindless ones from earlier, these seemed more agile. Clearly, they'd fed on flesh recently. Roar! One of the zombies opened its mouth wide, baring sharp teeth, and let out a menacing snarl at Ethan. Ethan glanced at it, his expression calm. He hadn't expected such a small, insignificant zombie to dare growl at him. But then, he caught the meaning behind the snarl. This is my boss's territory. Outsiders aren't welcome here. It was clear this zombie served another leader. This area belonged to a different zombie king. No wonder it had the audacity to challenge him. Ethan quickly understood the situation. But Bulldozer, with his fiery temper, wasn't one to let such disrespect slide. Seeing a zombie growl at his boss, he stormed forward in 2 heavy steps, grabbed the offending zombie by the neck like it was a helpless chick, and slammed it into the ground with brutal force. Crack! The young zombie's body shattered into pieces, blood splattering across the ground. Still unsatisfied, Bulldozer turned to the rest of the small group of zombies and, with a few punches and kicks, reduced them all to mangled heaps of flesh. When he returned to Ethan's side, his face was full of smug pride, as if silently demanding praise for his work. "Let's go. Time to head back," Ethan said casually, unfazed by the incident. He led his group of zombies away, without a second thought. But from a distant hill in the park, a group of zombies watched the scene unfold. At the front of the group stood a towering figure, at least 6 feet, 7 inches tall. His skin had a faint reddish hue, and thick black veins bulged across his face, forming grotesque patterns that made him look even more terrifying. Around his neck was something dark and furry, coiled like a massive scarf. Master, the humans in the shopping mall were hunted down by them. One of the zombies beside him communicated. This one had clearly evolved a significant level of intelligence, comparable to Laura's. The towering zombie let out a low growl, deep and guttural. He considered the mall part of his territory. The humans inside had been his to hunt, to consume slowly over time. But now another group of zombies had taken them all. The law of the wild was simple. 2 kings couldn't coexist in the same domain. Killing was instinctual for zombies, and by devouring the crystal cores of others, they could absorb their energy and grow stronger. "It's time." The zombie king's eyes gleamed with bloodlust. "Time to expand my territory." He had already marked Ethan and his group as prey. If his horde was to grow stronger, he would have to hunt down and kill other zombie kings. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The furry scarf around his neck suddenly let out a series of eerie squeaks. It wasn't a scarf at all. It was a massive rat. But what made it truly horrifying was its human-like head, covered in fine black hair, with a grotesque, twisted face that sent shivers down the spine. Ethan returned home and immediately took a bath. Afterward, he changed into a fresh set of clothes. Nina, his housekeeper, moved quickly and efficiently, tidying up the house until it was spotless. Every item was arranged with meticulous precision, so much so that even someone with OCD would feel at ease. After all, for most housekeepers, slacking off might cost them their paycheck. But for Nina, a poorly cleaned house could cost her life. When Ethan changed out of his clothes, Nina immediately took them to be washed. Even though Ethan hadn't physically touched anyone at the mall, his white shirt still carried faint traces of blood and the unmistakable metallic scent of violence. Nina could smell it clearly. "Boss, you went out for dinner again?" she asked hesitantly. "Yeah, buffet," Ethan replied nonchalantly. "Yikes." Nina shivered, pulling her neck back slightly. It must have been a big scene this time. But she didn't dare ask any more questions and quickly got to work washing his clothes. Ethan sat down and pulled out his phone, scrolling through the latest news online. Despite the chaos he'd just caused, Genesis Biotech hadn't yet discovered what had happened. Their official website still displayed an announcement. Operation King Hunt is progressing smoothly and will begin soon. The comments section was buzzing with activity. If they can wipe out the zombies, that'd be great. We could rebuild society. I really hope this mission succeeds. Genesis Biotech is just using this as an excuse to conduct human experiments. They don't care about humanity. They're only hunting zombies to further their own selfish goals. I wonder how this operation will turn out. Guess we'll just have to wait and see. Genesis Biotech was a global leader in biotechnology. They had even launched rockets into outer space and maintained partnerships with numerous countries, wielding vast resources and influence. The branch in Los Angeles was just one of their many outposts. But even in this apocalyptic world, they were thriving. Genesis Biotech probably has a ton of good stuff. Ethan thought to himself, already scheming. But Genesis Biotech had at least 1,000 Awakeners under their command. While Ethan was strong, he wasn't invincible. Taking them all down by himself was out of the question. Even if he brought Bulldozer, Laura, the PhD zombie, and his 2,000 elite zombies, breaking into their base still wasn't guaranteed. Unless he could command a horde of 1,000,000 zombies. Then, he could storm anyone, anywhere, without hesitation. Maybe it was time to expand his territory. Ethan's current 2,000-strong zombie army only controlled the area around his building. He had initially gathered them just to keep his home base secure and avoid being disturbed. But now, Ethan was starting to think bigger, recruiting more forces, conquering new lands. Over the next few days, Ethan continued his routine of devouring meat and drinking blood. He absorbed all 5 crystal cores he had collected, significantly boosting his strength. His domain of the dead expanded in range and could now be fully unleashed for 20 minutes, with even greater destructive power. Nightfall. Darkness blanketed the earth, and a blood-red moon hung high in the sky, staining the heavens with its ominous glow. It was yet another night of carnage. The area around the building had been restless lately. Zombies from other territories had been wandering into Ethan's domain, growling at Bulldozer and his crew in a clear display of provocation. These clashes often escalated into vicious brawls, with the two groups tearing into each other. Of course, Bulldozer wasn't one to back down. He smashed the heads of any intruding zombies without hesitation. Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing into the darkness outside. Suddenly, a faint squeaking sound echoed through the desolate streets. Moments later, pairs of glowing green eyes appeared, flickering with bloodlust. From the sewers along the roadside, a swarm of massive rats emerged. Each one was the size of a small pig. The rats squealed and sniffed the air, clearly searching for prey. It didn't take long for them to lock onto the zombies below the building. With a frenzied charge, they swarmed over one of the zombies, sinking their sharp teeth into its flesh. The zombie let out a pained howl as the rats clung to its body, biting and tearing. It staggered, trying to shake them off, but it didn't last long. Within moments, the zombie collapsed to the ground, and the rats devoured it completely, as if it had melted into the swarm. These mutated beasts treated zombies as a delicacy. The commotion quickly drew the attention of other zombies, who charged at the rats in retaliation. But the rats were incredibly agile, darting back and forth with ease, making them nearly impossible to catch. Some of the rats even taunted the zombies, zigzagging around them and dodging their attacks, leaving the zombies growling in frustration. Just as the rats were reveling in their dominance, a shadowy figure suddenly appeared, moving like the wind. With a flash of razor-sharp claws, the rats were sliced into pieces, their bodies falling to the ground in 6 neat segments. It was Laura, the female zombie. Her speed and agility were unmatched, allowing her to easily overwhelm the rats. A sinister smile spread across her face as she turned the slaughter into a twisted game. But she wasn't the only one joining the fray. From the shadows, a hulking figure emerged. Bulldozer stepped forward, his massive hands grabbing a rat midair. His fingers tightened, and despite the rat's frantic kicking and high-pitched squeals, it was no use. With a sickening crunch, Bulldozer crushed the rat in his grip. He licked the blood off his hand, his face lighting up with excitement. Without missing a beat, he stomped forward, crushing another rat under his boot, reducing it to a bloody pulp. Then, he grabbed 2 more rats, twisting them apart with his bare hands, as if he were snapping cucumbers in half. The rats, clearly intimidated, began to scatter in all directions. Within moments, the swarm had vanished into the darkness, leaving the streets eerily quiet once more. Hee hee! Bulldozer chuckled foolishly, holding two blood-soaked rats in his massive hands. He jogged off to a nearby alley, where he began gnawing on them like they were roasted sweet potatoes. Blood splattered everywhere, drenching his face in crimson. He didn't dare eat them out in the open. Ethan had made it clear, stop eating filthy things. That's junk food. If the boss caught him, he'd probably get scolded, or worse, looked down on. Incidents like these, rat attacks or zombie provocations, have been happening frequently over the past few days. Ethan had grown so used to them that he didn't even bother intervening anymore. The next morning, thick, oppressive clouds blanketed the sky, so dark they looked like ink. Before long, rain began to pour down in sheets. But this wasn't ordinary rain. Mixed in with the raindrops were tiny black worms, falling from the sky like some grotesque gift from above. It was a worm rain. The worms, each about the size of a pinky finger, landed on the streets and abandoned vehicles, making a faint plip-plop sound as they hit the surfaces. Within minutes, they covered the ground in a writhing, squirming mass. Ugh! Nina, who was inside the building, felt a chill run down her spine. The bizarre occurrences of the apocalypse were becoming more and more unsettling. Worm rain? What next? Ethan stood by the window, his sharp gaze fixed on the scene outside. His brows furrowed slightly. What awful weather. He recalled a news report from before the apocalypse. Back then, there had been stories of fish rain in some places, caused by tornadoes sucking fish out of the water and dropping them from the sky. This worm rain was probably something similar. But these worms weren't ordinary. Their mouths were lined with sharp, needle-like teeth, and they burrowed into zombie flesh with terrifying speed. Zombies that were once agile and strong became stiff and unresponsive after the worms entered their bodies, as if their movements were no longer their own. Fortunately, Ethan's zombie underlings were highly intelligent. Before the worms could burrow too deep, they yanked them out, and in some cases, stuffed them into their mouths, chewing them up with relish. Bulldozer, in particular, was completely unfazed. His thick skin made him practically immune to the worms' bites. He grabbed a handful of them and, like a kid eating chips, dumped them in his mouth all at once. Apparently, he liked the taste. He tilted his head back, opened his mouth wide, and let the worms rain directly into his mouth, as if he were drinking the rainwater. "Ah, thank you, Mother Nature, for this feast," he exclaimed, his voice booming with delight. The worm rain didn't last long. Within a few minutes, it stopped, leaving the streets littered with worms. They didn't seem to like sunlight, so they quickly burrowed into the sewers, soil, or cracks in the walls to avoid exposure. In the alley next to the building, Bulldozer crouched near the wall, his massive frame hunched over. He scooped up a handful of worms from the ground and began popping them in his mouth one by one, like he was snacking on sunflower seeds. Laura and the PhD zombie walked by and stopped to watch him, tilting their heads in curiosity. "Hey, the boss said not to eat junk food," Laura reminded him, her tone half scolding. "Chill." Bulldozer pressed a finger to his lips, signaling for her to keep quiet. He didn't want Ethan to find out. Then, with a mischievous grin, he held out a handful of worms to Laura. Laura tilted her head, her glowing eyes studying the wriggling worms for a moment. After some hesitation, she picked one up and popped it in her mouth. Not bad," she said, her face lighting up with surprise. The next thing you knew, she was crouched next to Bulldozer, the two of them munching on worms like kids sneaking snacks behind their parents' backs. The PhD zombie, arms crossed and leaning against the wall, watched them with a look of utter exasperation. "You two are going to get caught." "We won't," Laura said confidently, not even looking up. "The boss loves staying inside. He barely ever comes out." She seemed to know Ethan's habits well. But just as she said this, a shadowy figure appeared at the entrance of the alley. A pale, sinister face emerged from the darkness, its expression cold and unreadable. "Tastes good." Ethan's tone was calm, like he was just making small talk with friends. But Laura and Bulldozer immediately jumped up from where they had been crouching against the wall, standing ramrod straight. In the process, Bulldozer quickly moved his hand behind his back and quietly tossed the bug he was holding onto the ground. Then, with a goofy grin, he said, "Ha ha ha, boss, it was all Laura's idea? I didn't want to eat it at all." Huh? Laura turned to glare at him, speechless and a little annoyed. Her sharp nails dug into Bulldozer's side with a soft sound. In her mind, she cursed him. "Why are you lying?" But Bulldozer's thick skin made him practically immune to pain. He didn't even flinch. After all, he'd long since stopped caring about things like boiling water burns. Laura's little scratch didn't bother him in the slightest, and he just kept grinning like a fool. Ethan didn't seem too bothered by their antics. "I'm heading out for a bit. You two stay here and keep an eye on the place." "Oh, okay, sure." Bulldozer and Laura nodded quickly, though they couldn't help but feel a little curious. Where's the boss going? If he's going hunting, could we tag along? But since they'd already messed up earlier, neither of them dared to ask. Ethan shot the two zombies a sidelong glance. "Don't you two love eating bugs? While I'm gone, clean up all the bugs around the building. I don't want to see a single one when I get back." Got it, got it." The two nodded like woodpeckers, their heads bobbing up and down. Ethan left the building. He had already absorbed all 5 of his crystal cores, so he figured it was time to head out and see if he could find another lucky one to hunt for more. On top of that, he wanted to investigate the recent rat swarm attacks and zombie disturbances. Since the situation was still unclear, Ethan decided not to bring along his thousands of zombie underlings. It was easier for him to move stealthily on his own. If he ran into danger, he could activate his domain of the dead to either fight or retreat as needed. He could come and go as he pleased. But his underlings weren't so lucky. If they ran into a pack of mutant beasts or a larger, hostile zombie horde, they'd be in serious trouble. And if that happened, Ethan would be left all alone, a king without an army. As for the rat swarm attacks and zombie disturbances, Ethan wasn't entirely clueless. He suspected the source was nearby, most likely tied to the zombie faction he'd encountered in the park the other day. So, he started heading in that direction. It had been a month since the apocalypse began, and the streets were now littered with rusting, abandoned cars. Once bustling roads were overgrown with weeds. The entire city felt desolate and ruined. The only thing still moving were the zombies. Some stood motionless, others wandered aimlessly. They had no purpose, but the slightest sound or movement would activate them, sending them sprinting toward the source. Their terrifying faces, the low growls in their throats, and their bloodthirsty eyes all screamed of their insatiable hunger for flesh. When these wild zombies encountered Ethan, however, they didn't attack. In fact, they instinctively shrank back, parting to clear a path for him. But as Ethan continued forward, the number of wild zombies began to dwindle. The streets started to show signs of carnage. Scattered corpses of zombies lay everywhere, their bodies mangled and crushed as if they'd been run over by heavy machinery. They were nothing more than grotesque meat pancakes. This wasn't the work of humans. It was the result of a massive zombie horde trampling over its own kind. Low-level zombies lacked intelligence. When they charged forward in a frenzy, they didn't care about anything in their way. Inevitably, some unlucky ones got trampled to death. The larger the horde, the more casualties from friendly fire. Countless flies buzzed around the rotting corpses, their bloated green bodies much larger than before the apocalypse, each one about the size of a thumb. Their incessant buzzing was enough to drive anyone mad. By now, Ethan had entered the territory of another zombie king. The streets were littered with clumps of fur and black, pellet-like rat droppings, making the scene even more disgusting. Ethan could already picture it. Beneath his feet, in the sewers, there were undoubtedly thousands upon thousands of rats. They still retained their old habits, only coming out at night to scavenge for food. Not far off, a flock of pitch-black crows circled noisily in the sky, their harsh caws echoing as they spiraled around a tall building. Crows, symbols of death and misfortune. It was as if something inside that building had drawn them in, and they couldn't wait to get closer. Are there survivors? Ethan wondered, making a quick judgment before heading toward the high-rise. As he got closer, his suspicions were confirmed. The metallic tang of blood hit his nose. There were indeed living humans inside. But what puzzled him was the presence of zombies alongside the humans. Strangely, they seemed to be occupying the same space. What's going on? Without hesitation, Ethan activated his domain of the dead ability, slipping into stealth mode. His body became intangible, allowing him to phase through walls as he made his way toward the upper floors of the building. In this perilous post-apocalyptic world, invisibility was an invaluable skill. However, Ethan's stealth mode had one major drawback. He couldn't attack while hidden. The moment he struck, his physical form would be exposed. He stopped on the 18th floor. Ethan could sense it. This was the room. Inside were 4 humans and 1 zombie. Curiosity piqued. He phased through the wall and entered. The first room he stepped into was a cramped, dingy bedroom. The sight inside was horrifying. Blood was splattered everywhere, on the walls, the floor, every surface. The stench of iron and decay was overwhelming. The faint clinking of chains echoed in the room. Ethan turned his head toward the sound and saw a female zombie. Her hands were bound with chains, tied to the headboard of a bed. She thrashed and growled, her mouth snapping as she tried to break free. Across from her stood a man, a human. He had small, beady eyes and thick lips, and his gaze was fixed on the zombie with an unsettling intensity. "Isla, my goddess," the man murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. "Even though you've turned into a zombie, I'll still keep my promise to take care of you for the rest of your life. Do you remember? I once told you, no matter what you become, my love for you will never change." The female zombie snarled at him, her feral growls filled with rage. Drool dripped from her mouth, forming long, sticky strands. But the thick-lipped man didn't seem to mind. He smiled, his eyes narrowing with a strange affection. "You're still the same, always so fierce with me. I chased after you for 10 years, you know? Every morning, I brought you breakfast. Even when you were living with your boyfriend, I brought 2 portions. But you never once looked at me. You always yelled at me like this." Wow. Ethan couldn't help but think to himself, this guy's the ultimate simp. Even the most desperate fanboys would bow down to him. If Sheep Rambler were here, he'd probably hand this guy a cigarette in respect. But the man didn't seem to care about how pathetic he sounded. Instead, his face was filled with a twisted kind of happiness. "But now, things are different. You're finally with me. I can protect you forever. So what if it's the end of the world? Islam, my love, are you hungry? I'll go make you something to eat." With that, he turned and left the room, closing the door behind him. Ethan immediately followed, still in stealth mode. The man had no idea he was being watched. Ethan could sense it now. This thick-lipped man wasn't ordinary. His blood energy was unusually strong, far beyond that of a normal human. He was an awakener. The man walked into another room. When he opened the door, Ethan saw 5 other men inside. Their hands and feet were bound, and their mouths were sealed with duct tape. They could only let out muffled groans. The moment they saw the thick-lipped man, 3 of them began thrashing violently, their eyes wide with terror. But their bindings were tight, and their struggles were futile. The man narrowed his eyes, his lips curling into a smile as he slowly scanned the room. "Let's see. Who's the lucky one today? Who gets the honor of becoming food for my darling Isla?" The 3 captives stared in terror, their faces pale. They knew exactly what kind of person this man was, a complete psycho who planned to feed them to the zombies. One of them trembled uncontrollably, trying desperately to shrink back into the corner. The man with thick lips noticed and smirked. "All right, looks like it's going to be you. Huh? No. MMPH. MMPH. The man's mouth was taped shut, so all he could do was let out muffled cries. Thick lips strode over, grabbed him by the back of the neck like he was picking up a helpless kitten, and hoisted him into the air. Then, without hesitation, he turned and started walking toward the door. No matter how much the man struggled, it was useless. He could only watch in horror as they got closer and closer to the zombie room. His heart sank into a bottomless pit of despair. When the door creaked open, the stench of blood hit him like a wall. Inside, a female zombie was pacing restlessly, her eyes wild with excitement. She let out guttural snarls, her hunger palpable. "Look at that! Thick Lips said, his voice filled with twisted affection. See how happy my baby Isla is. MMPH. MMPH. The man's muffled cries turned into full-blown sobs. Tears streamed down his face as he shook his head frantically. Thick Lips ripped the tape off his mouth with a sharp tug. Got any last words? He asked almost casually. Please, I'm begging you, the man wailed, his voice cracking. Don't do this. I don't want to die. Please, I'll do anything. Thick Lips shook his head, almost pitying him. You don't get it, do you? Witnessing the love between me and Isla, that's an honor. With that, he tightened his grip and began dragging the terrified man closer to the zombie. The man screamed, his voice raw with desperation, as he was pulled toward his gruesome fate. But just as the zombie was about to lunge, a shadow appeared behind them. Ethan had been watching from the sidelines, his expression cold and detached. He wasn't interested in the drama unfolding before him. To him, none of this mattered. The only thing of value here was the crystal core inside Thick Lips' head. He decided to end it quickly. Kill the guy, take the core, and leave. Thick Lips froze. He was sharp. He immediately sensed Ethan's presence the moment he appeared. He spun around, his eyes narrowing. Who the hell are you? How'd you get in here? But before Ethan could respond, something strange happened. The female zombie, who had been snarling and thrashing moments ago, suddenly went quiet. Her wild, bloodthirsty expression softened. She seemed subdued, her eyes filled with something like reverence, even submission. What the? Thick Lips frowned, his confusion deepening. And then it hit him. This felt eerily familiar. It reminded him of the time he'd bent over backward to win the affection of a woman he worshipped, only to watch her grovel at someone else's feet. Jealousy flared in his chest, hot and suffocating. I'm gonna awaken her now, he roared, his voice shaking with rage. People like you don't deserve to live. Ethan studied him calmly. The apocalypse had clearly done a number on this guy. Years of fear and repression had twisted him into something unrecognizable. Still, Ethan hesitated for a moment. Would absorbing this guy's crystal core mess with his own mind? He wasn't sure. Meanwhile, the captive man, still tied up, saw Ethan as his last hope. Hey man, please help me. This guy's a psycho. He's gonna feed me to that zombie. Ethan glanced at him, unimpressed. Oh, he muttered indifferently. So what if he's a psycho? Ethan thought. I'm a zombie myself. Thick Lips' face contorted with fury. His hands began to glow faintly red, and his aura surged. He was clearly an awakener with some kind of physical enhancement ability. Let me show you what an awakener can do, he bellowed. With a roar, he lunged at Ethan, his mutated hands clawing through the air with incredible speed. But to Ethan, it was nothing special. Just another fool trying to act tough. With a single thought, Ethan activated his domain of the dead. A wave of overwhelming pressure rippled outward, blanketing the room. Thick Lips froze mid-attack. His body locked up, completely immobilized, as if someone had hit the pause button. He stood there, trembling, unable to move a muscle. Thanks to Ethan absorbing 5 crystal cores, his domain of the dead had grown even more powerful. For most awakeners, stepping into his domain was like walking into quicksand. They couldn't move an inch. Thick Lips felt like he was carrying a mountain on his back. His legs trembled violently, barely able to hold him up. In his eyes, the world around him had turned blood red, like he was standing in the middle of a battlefield littered with corpses. And at the peak of this mountain of death stood Ethan, the undisputed ruler. How is this possible? Thick Lips stammered, his voice shaking with fear. His body trembled even harder. He had always been the one in control, the one deciding who lived and who died. He took pride in being an awakener, someone above the rest of humanity. But now, standing before Ethan, he couldn't even lift a finger to fight back. Ethan didn't care about his internal struggle. He simply walked toward him, step by step. Thick Lips could feel death closing in, like the grim Reaper himself was approaching. He knew what was coming. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, he slowly turned his head, his movements stiff and unnatural, like a puppet on strings. His gaze locked onto the female zombie. If I can't escape death, he thought, then at least let me look at her one last time. That was his final thought. Ethan's slender fingers pierced through his skull with ease, breaking through the bone like it was paper. He reached inside and pulled out the crystal core. Thick Lip's body went limp. His vision went dark, and he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Just like that. He's dead? The tied-up man nearby stared in shock, his jaw practically hitting the floor. He had no idea what had just happened. All he saw was Ethan calmly approach Thick Lips and kill him as if it were nothing. "Damn, man, you're incredible," the man shouted, his voice filled with a mix of awe and desperation. "Come on, help me out. Untie me." Ethan glanced at him, his expression indifferent. He didn't move. "Did I ever say I was going to save you? Wait, what?" The man's face fell as he realized what Ethan's silence meant. The hope that had briefly flickered in his heart was snuffed out, plunging him back into despair. Just then, a sound came from the bedroom window, a faint flapping of wings. A massive crow landed on the balcony. The bird was enormous, standing nearly 3 feet tall. Its eyes glowed an eerie red, and its glossy black feathers shimmered like polished obsidian, sharp and menacing, almost like blades. Clearly, it had been drawn here by the scent of blood. Its crimson eyes peered through the gaps in the metal railing, staring intently into the room. "I'm hungry. So hungry. Can you open this for me? Please." "Oh." Ethan raised an eyebrow, surprised. He hadn't expected the crow to speak. Was it some kind of mutant? Maybe a crossbreed with a parrot? And it was polite, too. Ethan glanced at Thick Lip's corpse on the floor. It wasn't of any use to him anymore. Curious, he walked over to the window and, with a sharp push, broke open the metal railing. Thank you. The crow wasted no time. It smashed through the glass and swooped into the room, heading straight for Thick Lip's body. Without hesitation, it began tearing into the corpse. Its beak was razor-sharp, slicing through flesh and bone like a guillotine. In one bite, it severed Thick Lip's arm and swallowed it whole, bones and all. The sight was horrifying. The crow devoured the body with terrifying efficiency, leaving no trace behind, not even a scrap of bone. The tied-up man was frozen in fear. He had thought zombies were the worst thing the apocalypse had to offer, but now he realized there were even more terrifying creatures out there. And the crow wasn't even that big, yet its appetite was insatiable. In no time, Thick Lip's corpse was completely gone. The crow licked its beak, looking like it still wasn't satisfied. Its glowing red eyes shifted to the tied-up man, but it hesitated, glancing at Ethan as if seeking permission. In a strange, guttural voice, it asked, "I'm still hungry. Can I eat him too?" Ethan shrugged. "Go ahead." The crow tilted its head, almost as if it were nodding in gratitude. Thank you. You're so kind, giving me your food. You're a good person." "You're welcome," Ethan replied casually. "Wait, what?" The tied-up man's eyes widened in disbelief. He stared at the two of them, completely dumbfounded. "Good person? Are you kidding me?" The next second, a red-eyed crow swooped down at him, and the man completely lost consciousness. The crow's sharp beak pierced through his heart, and then it began feasting on him with gusto. After devouring the man, the crow seemed satisfied. It flapped its wings a few times and flew out the window. Bye-bye. I'll repay you someday." Its distinct bird call echoed in the sky, growing fainter as it disappeared into the distance. "Well, now this is interesting," Ethan muttered, intrigued. He had obtained a crystal core, so this trip wasn't a total waste. Suddenly, he remembered there were 2 survivors in the room across the hall. The 2 were still trembling, their faces pale with fear. Although they had narrowly escaped death earlier, they knew it was only a matter of time before they ended up as zombie food. The agonizing wait for death was almost worse than dying outright. At least that would have been quicker. Just then, the sound of footsteps approached the room. "He's coming back." Did the female zombie not get enough to eat? Their hearts leapt into their throats as the footsteps grew closer. But when the door opened, it wasn't the thick-lipped man from before. Instead, it was a tall, lean young man with strikingly handsome features. "Huh." The two froze for a moment, Then their expressions shifted to one of cautious hope. Could it be someone from a rescue team? Ethan scanned them with a calm gaze, already thinking about what to do with them. Killing them outright seemed pointless. They were just ordinary people, and their only real use was as bait. Because Ethan had a hunch. There weren't many zombies in the area around this high-rise. Instead, there were rat droppings and fur everywhere. Something was definitely lurking in the shadows. He could use these two to draw it out. "You two, get out of here," Ethan said, pulling out a knife and cutting the ropes binding them. The two survivors were overjoyed. They had been resigned to their deaths, but now, miraculously, someone had come to save them. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God, thank you." The man broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. The other survivor, more composed, asked cautiously, "Are you with the rescue team? Can you take us to shelter?" "No," Ethan replied, shaking his head. "I've got other things to do. You're on your own." "Oh, but—" The two hesitated. The outside world was dangerous, and without an awakener to protect them, their chances of survival were slim. But after weighing their options, they decided to leave. Staying in this hellhole wasn't an option either. Before leaving, they raided the kitchen for supplies, grabbing some food, a few kitchen knives, and even a boning knife. They were surprisingly well prepared. Still, Ethan knew their odds of surviving in this area were less than 1%. Whether they made it out alive would depend entirely on their luck. To be fair, this part of the city wasn't the most dangerous for ordinary people. If they'd been in Ethan's territory, they wouldn't have lasted a second. Once they were ready, the two quietly opened the door and tiptoed down the stairs. The faint growls of zombies echoed through the stairwell. If they made too much noise, they'd be torn apart in an instant. Ethan stood on the balcony above, watching the situation unfold below. He was deep in thought. Wouldn't it be boring if the bait I just let loose died before even leaving the building? Fortunately, about 10 minutes later, he saw two figures emerge from the building's entrance and step onto the street. They moved cautiously, sticking close to the walls of the building as they crept forward. Every step was deliberate, every movement careful. They were being as cautious as humanly possible. Ethan watched with keen interest, curious to see if the two would survive, or, more likely, how they would meet their end. On the street below, one of the men grumbled as they walked. "Oscar, that so-called rescue guy, was so irresponsible. He just let us go on our own. If we make it to a shelter, I'm definitely reporting him." "What are you even talking about? Be grateful he let us out all. Besides, have you thought about it? Was he really part of a rescue team? Don't forget how we ended up getting caught in the first place," the older man, Oscar, replied. "Ugh." The younger man shuddered, goosebumps rising as he recalled their earlier ordeal. That thick-lipped man had posted on the official shelter website, claiming to be part of a rescue team. He invited anyone in need of help to contact him. Overjoyed, they had reached out, only to be captured and tied up in that room, meant to be fed to zombies. Then, if he wasn't with the rescue team, why did he let us go? The younger man asked nervously. "How should I know? Just focus on staying alive," Oscar said firmly, his eyes scanning their surroundings. He noticed that there weren't many zombies in the area. As long as they stayed cautious and avoided drawing attention, they might just make it out. If they could get out of the city and into the sparsely populated outskirts, their chances of reaching a shelter would improve significantly. "If only we had a heavy-duty truck," Oscar muttered under his breath. But just as he spoke, his foot landed with a squelch. "Ugh, gross. What the hell? That's a huge pile of rat crap. Disgusting." Before he could complain further, a strange black mist began to creep across the desolate street, spreading like a living shadow and enveloping everything around them. It wasn't just mist. It felt like a psychic field, something that could invade the mind. "It's here," Ethan murmured from the balcony above. He could feel the presence now. The energy was strong, capable of influencing thoughts and emotions. If it continued to evolve, it might even develop the power of an absolute domain, a terrifying ability that could dominate an entire area. So, there was something lurking in this part of the city, and it wasn't weak. Ethan's curiosity was piqued. He wanted to see what it was. Down on the street, Oscar and the younger man, Liam, were completely unaware of the danger. They continued walking, their bodies now shrouded in the black mist. "Man, I'm starving. Let's eat something," Liam suddenly said. Oscar frowned. "Are you out of your mind? Eating out here? Do you have a death wish?" "But isn't this a restaurant?" Liam said, his voice distant and strange. "What the hell are you talking about?" Oscar snapped, turning to glare at him. But then he noticed something was off. Liam's eyes had a vacant, glassy look, and a strange smile was spreading across his face, as if he were in a trance. "Liam, what's wrong with you? Snap out of it!" Oscar shouted, shaking him. So much food, so delicious." Liam giggled, his voice eerie and childlike. Oscar's heart sank. Something was definitely wrong. In the apocalypse, there were plenty of monsters with bizarre abilities. Could this be the work of a phantom infected? As the thought crossed his mind, he suddenly saw a figure up ahead. A little old lady, her face warm and familiar. She was holding a steaming plate of apple pie and calling out to him. "Son, come eat. I made your favorite." "Mom," Oscar whispered, his voice trembling. His eyes glazed over, and a wave of longing washed over him. It had been over a decade since his mother passed, but the sight of her now, so kind and loving, was irresistible. "Come on, have some apple pie." "It's delicious," she said, smiling warmly. Oscar's face lit up with childlike joy. He took the plate from her hands, the overwhelming hunger in his stomach driving him to devour it greedily. Meanwhile, Liam was having his own hallucination. He saw a grand restaurant, its tables overflowing with gourmet dishes. He was seated inside, holding a massive tomahawk steak, tearing into it with wild abandon. But from Ethan's vantage point on the balcony, the reality was far more horrifying. What he saw wasn't a man eating apple pie or steak. Instead, the two men were standing in the middle of the street, their arms wrapped around each other, savagely biting and tearing into each other's flesh. Blood dripped down their bodies as they clawed and gnawed at one another, their faces twisted in grotesque ecstasy. Ethan's expression remained calm, but his eyes gleamed with intrigue. "Interesting? Well, that's definitely a creepy ability." Ethan stared silently, unsure where the real culprit was hiding. On the street, two people were tearing into each other, biting and clawing like rabid animals. Blood poured freely, their life force fading with every second. It didn't take long before both collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Two living, breathing humans had just killed each other with their bare teeth. If an ordinary person had witnessed this horrifying scene, they'd probably be scared out of their mind. Just then, a shadow emerged from a sewer grate by the side of the street. It was pitch black, and its high-pitched squeals echoed with excitement as it scurried toward the two corpses. It was a rat, but not just any rat. It was massive, the size of a large dog, with thick jet-black fur and two front teeth sharper than daggers. The creature wasted no time. It sank its teeth into the corpses, tearing into their flesh with a grotesque enthusiasm, devouring them in large, bloody chunks. Clearly, this rat was the mastermind behind the carnage. A mutated beast with a crystal core, it had the ability to manipulate human minds. It wasn't just any rat. It was the Rat King, the ruler of this area. I wonder what a mutated beast crystal core tastes like, Ethan muttered to himself. The last time he hunted, he'd taken down a two-headed wolf. That beast was still in the neurocore stage, but even then, its meat had tasted pretty good. Now, Ethan couldn't help but feel tempted by the thought of claiming the Rat King's crystal core for himself. The Rat King, however, wasn't oblivious. Even as it feasted, its heightened senses picked up on something. It could feel someone watching it. It froze mid-bite, then slowly turned its head. Sure enough, perched on a high-rise building in the distance was a human figure. "Oh, looks like I've been spotted," Ethan said, raising an eyebrow. Man and beast locked eyes, even though they were separated by hundreds of feet. For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. The Rat King's crimson eyes glowed with a violent, bloodthirsty light. It let out a series of sharp, angry squeals, its body radiating a faint black mist that began drifting toward Ethan. The mist was a psychic attack, its range vast and deadly. But compared to Ethan's domain of the dead, it was laughably weak. Ethan's eyes glimmered with a faint red light as he activated his absolute domain. The domain of the dead expanded outward, enveloping the area around him. The black mist disintegrated instantly, like snow melting under the sun. It couldn't even get close to him. The Rat King's nose twitched nervously. It was clearly shaken. Its gaze remained fixed on Ethan, who stood atop the building like a king surveying his domain. The Rat King could feel it, a suffocating pressure, as if it were staring at a predator far beyond its comprehension. Rats, by nature, are highly sensitive to danger. They can sense earthquakes, tsunamis, and other natural disasters long before they strike. And right now, this Rat King could feel death creeping closer and closer. Abandoning the corpses, it turned and bolted. Try to run? Ethan smirked. In one fluid motion, he leapt from the building, landing on the street below. His movements were swift and ghost-like, covering dozens of feet in the blink of an eye. The distance between them, once hundreds of feet, vanished in mere moments. The Rat King let out a piercing screech, its voice sharp enough to make the air tremble. Screech! The sound echoed through the streets, carrying with it an eerie, commanding tone. Ethan suddenly heard a rustling noise beneath his feet. From the sewers, the sound grew louder and louder, until, whoosh, a swarm of rats erupted from the ground like a black fountain, pouring out of the sewer grates in a writhing, chittering mass. The Rat King had summoned reinforcements. The swarm spread out, filling the streets. Rats of all sizes, some as big as dogs, others as small as cats, came charging from every direction, their eyes glowing with a feral intensity. So, this is how it calls for backup. Ethan muttered, now surrounded by a sea of rats. The swarm surged toward him, a living tide of teeth and claws. Each rat seemed more vicious than the last, their mutated forms brimming with aggression. But Ethan's domain of the dead was unstoppable. Any rat that dared to enter his domain was instantly obliterated. Their bodies exploded like overripe fruit, splattering the ground with gore. The rat swarm was relentless, but around Ethan, there was a vacuum of death. Nothing could get close. Still, the rats showed no fear. They charged forward like moths to a flame, throwing themselves at him without hesitation. Ethan had become a living meat grinder. Chunks of flesh and sprays of blood filled the air around him. In just a few breaths, the ground was piled high with rat corpses, layer upon layer. Everywhere he looked, there were rats. Ethan's sharp gaze scanned the chaos, searching for the Rat King. But the cunning creature had vanished, blending into the swarm. Its exact location was impossible to pinpoint. This rat's harder to catch than I thought. Ethan muttered, his eyes narrowing. As he surveyed the battlefield, he suddenly spotted a large rat lounging on top of a bus stop. Its eyes were half closed, its tail swaying lazily, and it was staring at him with a smug, almost mocking expression. Still daring to taunt me. Huh? Ethan immediately recognized it as the Rat King. Without hesitation, he charged toward it. But the Rat King didn't panic. With a casual leap, it disappeared into a nearby sewer grate, vanishing into the swarm once again. Ethan cursed under his breath. He'd lost sight of it again. Something wasn't right. His domain of the dead could only remain active for about 20 minutes, and 2 minutes had already passed. If this dragged on, his chances of success would drop significantly. As Ethan weighed his options, the Rat King reappeared. This time, it was perched on a roof of a wrecked carport, staring at him with the same infuriatingly smug expression. Ethan lunged toward it again. But, just like before, the Rat King slipped away at the last second, disappearing into the shadows. Meanwhile, the endless tide of rats continued to surge toward Ethan, wave after wave. It was clear now. The Rat King wasn't trying to fight him. It was trying to wear him down. Ethan's mind raced. Should he just give up? If his domain of the dead ran out, the rats would swarm him. While his body was strong enough to withstand their sharp teeth, the thought of being covered in filthy sewer rats made his skin crawl. And without the domain's protection, hunting the Rat King would become even harder. Even with my abilities, There's no guarantee I'll succeed in taking it down, Ethan thought to himself. But just as he was about to retreat, the Rat King appeared again. This time, it was perched on a trash can, its eyes half closed as it stared at him with that same infuriatingly smug look. Ethan clenched his fists, but he didn't move. He wasn't going to fall for the same trick again. Instead, he decided to use the remaining time on his domain of the dead to escape the area. He could always come back later to deal with the Rat King when the odds were more in his favor. But just as he was about to leave, something unexpected happened. The bright sky suddenly darkened, as if a massive shadow had fallen over the area. Caw, caw, caw. A piercing cry echoed through the air. Ethan looked up, startled. Far above, a massive black shape loomed, and the sound of flapping wings filled the sky. Among the cacophony of caws, a strange, almost human-like voice rang out. "Hello, good man." "Oh." Ethan raised an eyebrow, glancing upward. It was a large crow, the same one he'd fed before. The bird circled above him, its crimson eyes gleaming with a fierce, predatory light. It had come to help. The red-eyed crow let out a sharp, ear-splitting screech, and suddenly the sky was filled with thousands of crows. The flock descended like a black storm, diving toward the rat swarm below. Each crow was like a missile, plummeting toward the ground with deadly precision. Their razor-sharp beaks pierced through the rats with ease, killing them instantly. The tide of rats was halted. The crows tore through the swarm, their numbers overwhelming the rodents. The Rat King, still perched on the trash can, watched in disbelief. Its once relaxed demeanor was gone, replaced by twitching nostrils and a look of pure rage. It was furious. It never expected that a flock of crows would come to help this human. A strong sense of danger surged again. Sensing that the situation was turning bad, the giant rat decided it was time to leave. It quickly tried to make its escape, preparing to leap into the sewer. But before it could, the sound of rushing wind filled the air. Several crows dove down, surrounding it. One of them slammed heavily into the rat, sending it flying dozens of feet away. Ethan glanced over, his eyes narrowing. He knew this was his chance. These crows are the real deal. When it matters, they really show up. He muttered. He leapt into the air, pushing his absolute domain to its limit. Every rat caught within its range exploded into pieces. The Rat King, now panicked, tried to flee. But suddenly, it felt an overwhelming pressure bearing down on it. Its body froze. It couldn't move at all. Looking up, it saw a tall figure standing before it. Ethan's gaze was cold, filled with murderous intent. The Rat King, now trapped within the absolute domain, had lost all its arrogance. Its body trembled uncontrollably. Its eyes, surprisingly, showed a hint of pleading, as if begging for mercy. It almost looked pitiful. Ethan focused his thoughts, concentrating the pressure of the absolute domain into a single point. With a loud bang, the Rat King's body exploded into pieces. A crystal core shot out from the remains, and Ethan caught it in his hand. The moment the Rat King died, the once ferocious swarm of rats lost their leader. Chaos broke out among them as they screeched in panic and scattered in all directions. The massive horde of rats, which had been like a tidal wave moments ago, now retreated just as quickly. In no time at all, they were gone. The street was left in ruins, littered with shredded rat corpses and chunks of flesh. The stench of blood hung thick in the air. A flock of large crows landed on the ground, pecking at the remains. "Goodbye, kind human." The lead crow circled Ethan a few times before flapping its wings and flying off with the rest of the flock. And with that, the street fell silent once more. Ethan watched the crows disappear into the distance. He couldn't help but feel that this was karma, good deeds being repaid. Maybe he should start feeding small animals more often and try to be a good person. He glanced around. While the Rat King on this street had been dealt with, there were likely other threats lurking in the surrounding areas. After all, the Rat King wasn't the true ruler of this place. The real overlord here was probably a zombie king. Ethan decided not to push his luck. With 2 crystal cores in hand, he had enough to absorb for a while. It was time to head back to his base and lay low for a bit. With that, his figure vanished as he activated his stealth ability and returned to his territory. But not long after Ethan left, a group of zombies appeared on the blood-soaked street. Leading them was a zombie king with dark red skin and bulging black veins. It was the infamous red-faced zombie king from a park. Around its neck was something furry and pitch black. As it raised its head, the creature revealed a human-like face covered in black fur. Squeak, 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 squeak. The human-faced rat jumped down from the zombie king's neck and scurried over to the pile of rat corpses. It let out a mournful cry, filled with sorrow. "My wife, how could you die? Who did this to you? I'll avenge you, no matter what." The human-faced rat rubbed its grotesque face against the shredded remains of the Rat King, its voice trembling with grief. Before long, its fur was soaked in blood. "Scarf, don't be too upset. Anyone who dares invade my territory, I'll make sure they pay with their life." The red-faced zombie king's voice was hoarse, like the sound of grinding stones. Behind it stood several trusted subordinates, all highly evolved. Their intelligence was on par with beings like Bulldozer and Laura, showing signs of advanced thought. "Boss," I asked around. "It was that zombie from the tower who did this," one of the subordinates reported. "Oh." The red-faced zombie king's eyes gleamed with murderous intent. It had already been planning to eliminate that rival to expand its territory, but now the provocation had come straight to its doorstep. "How many zombies does he have over there?" "After some scouting, we've figured out about 2,000, the subordinate replied. "Only 2,000? The red-faced zombie king tilted its head, finding it hard to believe. It had expected the rival to be much stronger. After all, under its own command, it had already gathered over 20,000 zombies. 20,000 against 2,000? That would be a walk in the park. "Scarf, get ready. I'll avenge you right away." Meanwhile, Ethan had no idea any of this was happening. He had already returned home. As usual, he started his routine, soaking in a hot bath, changing into clean clothes, and then beginning to absorb the energy from the crystal cores he had collected. The Rat King's crystal core was pitch black, like a perfectly ripened cherry, and it gave off a faint, sweet aroma. The energy within it was incredibly pure, providing a significant boost to Ethan's abilities. Perhaps it was because the Rat King's mental field had some similarities to his domain of the dead, making the energy particularly compatible with him. Over the next few days, Ethan stayed low at home, sticking to his usual cautious approach. Since taking down the Rat King, neither rats nor zombies had come to bother him. Occasionally, a crow would circle in the sky above, but that was the only sign of life. During this time, Ethan used his phone to gather information about the outside world. The Genesis Biotech website was especially lively. The incident at the mall had been made public. Several Awakeners had been killed, and billions worth of supplies had vanished. The survivor forums were buzzing with speculation. Over 10 Awakeners wiped out in a single night. What kind of monster could have done this? Yeah, what level of zombie king are we even talking about here? It's terrifying. And on top of that, over 200 survivors were involved, and all the supplies were looted. Genesis Biotech isn't as reliable as they claim. They were hyping up their Operation King Hunt, but it looks like they got hunted instead. Could it be that it wasn't zombies, but another human group that did this? That's possible. I've heard rumors about rogue Awakener groups out there, doing all kinds of terrible things, even raiding official shelter supplies. The Westfield Century City Mall incident had become a tangled mystery, leaving everyone curious about what really happened that night. But there were no survivors left to tell the tale. It was quickly becoming the greatest unsolved mystery of the apocalypse. Still, Genesis Biotech wasn't ready to give up. The billions worth of supplies were far too valuable to simply vanish without explanation. There was no way they'd let it go. They immediately issued a public statement. "Our company is committed to uncovering the truth behind the mall incident and honoring the memory of Marcus and the others who gave their lives. Effective immediately, Operation King Hunt will commence. We will hunt down every zombie king and recover the lost supplies." Ethan, lounging at home, muttered to himself as he read the statement on his phone. These people just can't stay out of trouble, can they? Meanwhile, at Genesis Biotech, preparation for the operation were in full swing. A group of awakeners sat in a conference room, their attention fixed on a large screen at the front. The screen displayed a detailed map of Los Angeles. A middle-aged man stood at the front, pointing to the map as he explained. After a month of drone reconnaissance, we've mapped out the basic distribution of zombies. In the area surrounding the mall, there are roughly 10 zombie king territories. Based on their threat levels, we've classified them from 1-star to 5-star difficulty. 5-star zones are the most dangerous, while 1-star zones are relatively safer. For example, this area near the tower. He circled a spot on the map with a laser pointer. This territory has about 2,000 zombies, making it the smallest of the Zombie King territories. We've classified it as a 1-star difficulty hunt. The awakeners in the room exchanged glances, feeling like this was starting to resemble a video game dungeon raid. Still, a 1-star difficulty hunt sounded like an easy job. Immediately, hands shot up as people scrambled to volunteer. This one's perfect for me. I'll take it. No, I'll go. Let me handle it. At the back of the conference room sat a middle-aged man named Nathan Carter, the person in charge here. Watching his team of awakeners act so spinelessly, he couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration. After all, only by hunting down powerful zombie kings could they evolve and grow stronger. But instead, they were slacking off, choosing missions with the lowest difficulty. Still, maybe it wasn't all bad. If this operation went smoothly, it could boost morale, enhance the company's reputation, and earn the trust of the survivors. Meanwhile, Ethan was still lounging at home, sipping a crimson liquid from a wine glass. His posture was elegant, his life leisurely. Outside the building, a red-eyed crow circled a few times in the air before landing on a street lamp. A little blackbird. In a nearby alley, Bulldozer peeked out, his massive head half visible as he observed the scene. He was fiercely territorial. He'd noticed this crow hanging around the area for a while now, and being a bit of a mischievous brute, he decided he was going to catch it. So, Bulldozer began creeping toward the crow, moving as quietly as possible. He tiptoed like a cat, his steps light and deliberate, not making a single sound. Because he was being so cautious, it took him a full 5 minutes to cover just 50 feet. But he was secretly pleased with himself. The crow didn't seem to notice him at all. It stayed perched on a street lamp, showing no signs of flying away. Now, Bulldozer was less than 30 feet away. He bent his knees slowly, gathering all his strength, and then leapt into the air. Gotcha! Bulldozer's jump was so powerful it cracked the ground beneath him. He shot toward the crow like a cannonball, his massive hand reaching out to grab it. But just as he was about to succeed, the crow suddenly flapped its wings and shot straight up, putting some distance between them and narrowly avoiding Bulldozer's grasp. Can't catch me, can't catch me. The crow's unique, mocking voice echoed from above, its tone both smug and taunting. Roar! Bulldozer let out an angry bellow, furious. He grabbed a manhole cover from the side of the road, swung his arm back, and hurled it at the crow. But the crow was quick. It flapped its wings again, flying even higher. Can't hit me. Can't hit me. Rah! You little blackbird. Come down here if you've got the guts. Bulldozer roared, realizing he couldn't reach it anymore. The crow ignored him completely. Instead, it flapped its wings and flew higher, eventually disappearing into the distance. Damn it. Bulldozer stomped and pounded his chest in frustration, but there was nothing more he could do. The crow soared up to the 20th floor of a building and landed on a metal railing. Inside the spotless, pristine apartment, Ethan was lounging comfortably. Hello, good man. Hello, good man. Well, if it isn't Buddy Crow. Ethan glanced over. He recognized the big crow immediately. If it hadn't helped him hunt the mutant Rat King, things would have been much harder for him. He owed Buddy Crow a reward. Ethan, ever generous, opened the window and pulled a few large drumsticks out of his spatial storage ring, tossing them out. The big crow gobbled them up one by one, as if they were candy. "Thank you, good man. Thank you, good man." "No problem." Leaning on the windowsill, Ethan continued chatting casually. "What brings you here today? Got some free time to visit me?" "Someone's coming." "Zombies, too." "A big group," the crow squawked. Apparently, it had spotted something while flying overhead and had come to warn Ethan. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Hearing the news didn't surprise him much. He'd made plenty of enemies recently. It was only a matter of time before they came looking for trouble. If they dared to come after him, he'd make sure they learned the true meaning of pain. It was perfect timing, really. He just finished absorbing the 2 crystal cores from his last hunt and was wondering where to find more. Now, someone was delivering them right to his doorstep. Still, he couldn't afford to be careless. He needed to prepare for battle. Ethan quickly sent out a signal to his crew, letting them know that intruders were on their way to attack their territory. When Bulldozer heard that someone was invading their territory, he completely lost it. He was already furious from his failed attempt to catch the crow, and now this? It was a last straw. Roar! His deafening roar echoed through the area, and in response, a chorus of guttural growls erupted all around him. One by one, his elite zombie underlings emerged from the shadows. Normally, zombies were sluggish during the day, but now they were brimming with energy. Their bloodshot eyes gleamed with a savage hunger, their ferocity palpable, radiating an overwhelming killing intent. Invading their territory? Were these fools asking to die? 2,000 elite zombies assembled, their sheer numbers creating a terrifying spectacle. At the forefront of the horde stood Bulldozer, Laura, and the PhD zombie, 3 of the most powerful lieutenants in the area. The zombies were ready, their ranks tight and disciplined, prepared to unleash a blood-soaked massacre. Laura, meanwhile, let out a creepy, high-pitched giggle. Unlike Bulldozer, she wasn't angry about the invasion. In fact, she seemed thrilled, as if the whole thing was some kind of twisted game. Her thirst for carnage was even greater than Bulldozer's. She lived for this. Ethan, on the other hand, had taken up a position on the rooftop of the building. The wind whipped through his hair as he stood there, his sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. His calm, yet commanding presence exuded an air of quiet confidence. In the distance, faint black dots appeared on the skyline, rapidly approaching. They were Genesis Biotech's aerial reconnaissance drones. On the streets below, a convoy of heavily modified armored vehicles rumbled forward. Leading the charge was a massive bulldozer, plowing through everything in its path. Abandoned cars, stray zombies, nothing could stand in its way. This was Genesis Biotech's Operation King Hunt team. The squad was made up of 10 Awakeners, 4 of whom had already condensed crystal cores, along with a 500-strong armed force. The soldiers were fully equipped, carrying high-powered firearms and wearing sleek black nanocombat suits. Each suit bore the red Genesis Biotech logo on the chest, giving them a high-tech, almost futuristic look. These nanocombat suits were no joke. They were tough enough to withstand zombie claws and bites, and even a knife couldn't pierce them. They were incredibly effective in close combat. But that wasn't all. Genesis Biotech had also brought along 2 bioengineered weapons, Doom Hunters, to bolster their firepower. Inside one of the vehicles sat the 4 Crystal Core Awakeners, the main force of this operation. 3 men and 1 woman. They were the team's heavy hitters. "This mission's a sweet deal. Lucky we got assigned to it," one of the men said with a smug grin. The woman nodded. "A 1-star zombie nest. Perfect for some training. This is my first time on a mission like this." "Ha, then you'd better watch closely and learn," the man replied, clearly enjoying his role as the experienced veteran. Their team leader, Michael Morgan, cut in with a warning. "Evan, even a lion uses its full strength to hunt a rabbit. Don't get cocky. Every zombie is dangerous." "Captain, it's just 2,000 zombies," Evan said with a shrug. "And the zombie king here probably doesn't have any special abilities, just brute strength. If it were anything more, it'd have a bigger territory than this." The last man, a tall and imposing figure, chimed in. "As long as we don't run into a phantom infected, we'll be fine. Purely physical zombies are the easiest to deal with." "Oh." The woman listened intently, as the three men discussed tactics. It was her first mission, and she was quickly realizing there was a lot more to hunting zombies than she'd thought. She made a mental note to learn as much as she could from her more experienced teammates. Aside from the Operation King Hunt Squad, another force was also converging on the area. It was none other than the red-faced Zombie King from the Park District. Wearing its signature scarf, it was here to avenge the mutant Rat King, take out Ethan, and claim his territory in the process. The red-faced Zombie King didn't come alone. It brought an army. A massive horde of 20,000 zombies surged forward like a dark, unstoppable tide. Their roars filled the air as they charged, a terrifying flood of death. Leading the pack were over 100 elite, agile zombies, leaping and bounding like crazed monkeys. Mixed into the horde were countless mutated giant rats, their glowing red eyes brimming with ferocity. The sight of 20,000 zombies flooding the streets was nothing short of awe-inspiring. At the back of the horde, the red-faced Zombie King strolled leisurely with a few of its trusted lieutenants. It didn't think it would need to lift a finger. 2,000 zombies on Ethan's side versus its 20,000? The outcome was a foregone conclusion. Boss, this fight's going to be over in no time. You can just show up at the end and collect the crystal cores, one of its lieutenants said. The red-faced Zombie King nodded approvingly. It liked the sound of that. Meanwhile, the Operation King Hunt Squad had reached their target location. Armed personnel began systematically taking out the scattered zombies on the outskirts. Gunfire echoed through the streets, and zombies dropped one after another. Michael and the other three Awakeners stepped out of their vehicle, scanning the area. Stray zombies emerged from alleyways and side streets, but they didn't even get close before being gunned down. There was no need to worry about them. Their attention shifted toward the building ahead. In the middle of the road stood a towering figure. It was none other than the raging Bulldozer. Roar! Bulldozer had caught the scent of humans and let out an earth-shaking roar in their direction. Its fury was palpable. If Ethan hadn't ordered it to hold back, it would have already charged forward, eager to tear them apart. Looks like a strength Zombie King. Evan observed, his tone calm. Judging by how clumsy it looks, it probably doesn't have any special abilities. Yeah, Michael nodded. But we should still be cautious. There might be other Zombie Kings around. Look at the horde behind it. They seem pretty evolved. Ugh, this is terrifying. The only female Awakener in the group gasped, her voice trembling. It was her first mission, and she couldn't hide her fear. Evan, ever the gentleman, tried to reassure her. Don't worry. It's just a one-star zombie nest. Only about 2,000 zombies, and they're not packed too tightly. We'll clear them out in no time. Yeah, let's wrap this up quickly and get our reward. I haven't eaten properly in days, grumbled the last member of the team, a tall, burly man. Even with Genesis Biotech's advanced technology, food was still in short supply. As the Operation King Hunt Squad moved forward, the tension in the air grew thicker. The two forces were closing in on each other, the atmosphere charged like a powder keg ready to explode. Bulldozer stood at the front, exuding an aura of raw power. It looked like a one-man army, ready to take on anything. Its massive fists were clenched, muscles bulging grotesquely, and its eyes burned with murderous intent. It was just waiting for Ethan's command to charge forward and rip those humans to shreds. Laura, another of Ethan's lieutenants, had stopped smiling. She tilted her head, staring intently at the humans ahead. Her fingers twitched with anticipation. What's taking the boss so long to give the order? She was itching to kill. The zombies grew restless, their roars echoing through the streets. But Ethan remained silent, unmoving. The humans were now less than 1,500 feet away, close enough to almost be within firing range. What's the boss doing? Did he wander off to find something to eat and forget about us? Bulldozer muttered impatiently, glancing back at the others. The PhD zombie shot him a withering look. Idiot, do you think the boss is as brainless as you? No, orders mean we wait. Wait? They're practically going to roll their trucks right over my face. Laura growled, clawing at her hair in frustration. She was on the verge of snapping. But just as the Operation King Hunt squad advanced another 30 feet, they came to a halt as well. Captain Michael narrowed his eyes, carefully observing the scene ahead. These zombies, something's off about them. What do you mean, Captain? Evan stepped forward, curious. Michael stared ahead, his tone serious. If these are normal zombies, they'd have charged at us the moment we showed up. But they're just standing there, not moving. That's true. The female awakener chimed in, nodding. These zombies don't act like the ones I've seen before. The tall man in the group agreed as well. When zombies behave like this, it usually means there's a high-intelligence zombie controlling them, Michael added. Or maybe they're just dumb, Evan suggested with a shrug. Maybe they don't want to leave their territory. The four of them stayed on the outskirts, observing and debating their next move. None of them dared to advance, and the standoff dragged on for several minutes. The tall man finally broke the silence. What if it's a trap? A trap? You think zombies are smart enough to set traps? Evan couldn't help but laugh. Michael thought about it for a moment. It had seemed unlikely. They were already here, and no matter what was going on with these zombies, their mission was to wipe them out. 2,000 zombies, that's all. Even if something unexpected happens, we can handle it. Let's get this over with, Michael said decisively. Got it, Evan replied eagerly, clearly itching to fight. The rest of the team took a deep breath, their expressions hardening as they prepared for the oncoming horde. But just as the tension reached its peak, the ground suddenly began to rumble. A low, thunderous sound echoed through the streets, accompanied by chaotic footsteps, guttural roars, and high-pitched squeals. The noise came from all directions. Something's wrong. Michael's brow furrowed, his face darkening instantly. The armed personnel exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't need to say anything. They all recognized the sound. They'd been through this before. This was the sound of a massive zombie horde. And sure enough, it began. First, a few agile zombies leapt onto the rooftops around them, crouching on all fours like predators, their glowing eyes locked onto the humans below. Then, from every street corner and alleyway, an endless wave of zombies poured out, accompanied by swarms of mutated giant rats. Where the hell did all these zombies come from? Michael and the others were stunned. The sheer number of zombies far exceeded the 2,000 they'd been expecting. It was overwhelming, and they could only assume they'd walked straight into an ambush. What do we do now? The female awakener asked nervously, her voice trembling. The others looked grim. No one had a clear plan. Michael scanned their surroundings, his jaw tightening. We don't have a choice. Get ready to fight. The zombies charged forward, their speed terrifying. In the blink of an eye, they were upon them. Open fire, Michael shouted. The sound of gunfire erupted, deafening and relentless. The 500 armed personnel formed a tight formation, their firepower concentrated and devastating. Zombies fell in droves, mowed down like wheat under a scythe. But the horde was relentless. They kept coming, trampling over the bodies of their fallen, some even rolling forward after being knocked down. They didn't care about pain or death. They only cared about reaching their prey. The most dangerous among them were the elite, agile zombies. They leapt from rooftops with incredible speed, catching the soldiers off guard. In an instant, they'd pounce on their targets, pinning them to the ground and tearing into them with razor-sharp claws and teeth. These elite zombies were too fast and too strong for the regular soldiers to handle. Only Michael and the other awakeners could deal with them. But then, something even worse happened. The concrete beneath their feet began to crack. High-pitched squeals echoed from below as mutated rats burst out of the ground. The rats swarmed the soldiers, climbing up their bodies and sinking their teeth into exposed flesh. Some went straight for their ankles, biting down hard and causing the soldiers to scream in agony. The battlefield descended into chaos. Gunfire, roars, and screams filled the air as the two sides clashed in a brutal, bloody melee. The soldiers fought desperately, but the sheer ferocity of the zombie horde and the swarming rats made it clear this was no ordinary fight. Not far away, Bulldozer and Laura stood watching the carnage unfold. For once, they weren't in a hurry to join the fight. Instead, they just stared at the scene in confusion. What the hell is going on? Seriously? This is supposed to be my turf, so why are those two groups fighting each other up front? Bulldozer scratched his head, confused. Wait a second, don't tell me they came to my territory just to settle their own beef? Meanwhile, Ethan stood tall on a rooftop, his lean figure silhouetted against the sky. He'd already noticed earlier that a massive horde of zombies was heading this way, so he told his crew to hold back and not get involved. Now, with the two factions going at it like there's no tomorrow, Ethan decided to just sit back and enjoy the show. Go on, give it your best shot. He even cheered them on in his head, secretly hoping they'd tear each other apart. A red-eyed crow circled around Ethan, its raspy voice breaking the moment. Hey, good guy. When's dinner at your place? Don't rush me. The water in the pot isn't even boiling yet, Ethan replied without even turning around. Turns out, Buddy Crow had shown up just in time for dinner, hoping to mooch a meal. In the distance, the battlefield was pure chaos. Gunfire echoed through the air, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and severed limbs littered the ground. The stench of blood was overwhelming, turning the place into something straight out of a nightmare. The humans had brought out their trump card, two 10-foot-tall bioengineered killing machines, Doom Hunters. These hulking monstrosities had broad, muscular builds and grotesque scars running across their massive foreheads, like giant centipedes crawling over their faces. Their bodies were wrapped in ammo belts, and each carried a massive iron hammer strapped to their backs. In their right hands, they wielded Gatling guns, the barrels already spinning as they unleashed a storm of bullets. The 6 rotating barrels roared to life, spitting fire and raining down a relentless hail of bullets. It was a metal storm. Any zombie unlucky enough to get hit was either blown in half or completely obliterated, their remains scattered across the battlefield in gruesome fashion. If an elite zombie managed to get close, the Doom Hunters didn't flinch. They'd simply swing their massive iron hammers in a devastating counterattack. No one knew what material the hammers were made of, but they were unbelievably dense, easily weighing 40 tons. When they struck the ground, they left deep craters, and any zombie caught in the impact zone was instantly reduced to a bloody pulp. Watching the carnage unfold, Ethan couldn't help but be reminded of his childhood. Back then, every Thanksgiving at the orphanage, they'd roast a turkey. His job was to crush ice for the lemonade. Looking at the zombies now, he thought they weren't much different from those ice cubes. The arrival of the Doom Hunters had completely turned the tide in favor of the humans. Even with the overwhelming numbers of the zombie horde, they couldn't break through the line. No wonder these things were considered the ultimate weapon in the zombie eradication program. The only real threat to the humans was the occasional giant, rats scurrying out from underground. But even then, the soldiers were equipped with nanocombat suits, which the rats' sharp teeth couldn't penetrate. At most, they'd manage to bite someone, but that was about it. It was clear that Operation King Hunt was no joke. They were a force to be reckoned with. In just 5 minutes, they'd wiped out 6,000 or 7,000 zombies, reducing the once massive horde by a third. And that's when it happened. The red-faced zombie king strolled onto the battlefield, wearing what looked like a scarf around his neck. He moved at a leisurely pace, as if he had all the time in the world. He glanced around, wondering if his minions had already taken over Ethan's territory. But as he squinted at the scene in front of him, something felt off. His minions weren't just fighting humans. They were locked in a full-on battle with them. And those 2 Doom Hunters? They stood out like sore thumbs, smashing zombies left and right with their massive hammers, as if they were crushing ice cubes. To make matters worse, there were human awakeners on the battlefield, individuals with supernatural abilities, tearing through his forces like they were nothing. What the hell is going on here? The zombie king muttered, his voice low and dangerous. One of his elite zombies shuffled over to report. Boss, there are human awakeners here. We've started fighting them. Oh, yeah, no kidding. The zombie king could see that for himself. And what about the zombie king inside that building? Has he come out yet? No idea. Doesn't seem like it. What? The red-faced zombie king's temper flared. The whole point of this operation was to take down the rival zombie king. But now, his forces had suffered heavy losses, and they hadn't even seen their target yet. This was unacceptable. Boss, how come there are human awakeners here? One of the underlings asked for the back. The red-faced zombie king couldn't figure out either. Sure, he'd evolved enough to gain intelligence, but let's be honest, he wasn't exactly a genius. Could it be that he's working with the humans? Boss, is it possible? Another zombie chimed in that the humans came here to attack him too, but we just ran into them first. The red-faced zombie king's eyes widened. That actually made sense. Wait a second, did they just screw this whole thing up? Rare. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got, until he was practically screeching in frustration. So, boss, what do we do now? Should we retreat? One of his minions asked cautiously. Retreat. The zombie king's eyes burned with fury. After losing so many of his forces, retreating would only make him feel even more humiliated. They'd already sunk too much into this fight. There was no turning back now. The only way to make up for the losses was to win, no matter the cost. Besides, humans were enemies too. And their crystal cores? Oh, those were even sweeter. There's no way out now. Kill them. Kill them all. Roar. At his command, the zombies behind him let out deafening howls. If the boss said no retreat, then there was no retreat. Their eyes turned blood red as they charged forward, throwing themselves into the fray. These weren't just any zombies. They were highly evolved, practically on the same level as zombie kings themselves. Their strength was terrifying. Screech! The scarf-like creature on the zombie king's shoulder let out a piercing shriek before leaping off. It hopped and scrambled its way up a nearby building, its body beginning to emit tendrils of black mist. This wasn't just any ordinary zombie. It had a sinister ability, mind control. Wait, is that a zombie king? Michael's brow furrowed as he heard the deafening roars echoing across the battlefield. He'd already guessed that a horde of this size had to be led by a zombie king. Everyone, stay sharp. The real fight is about to begin. Got it. The soldiers around him responded in unison, their voices steady and determined. But the black mist was already creeping toward them, swirling around several of the armed personnel. I'm so hungry. Yeah, me too. Hey, look over there. Look at that, the beach. I want to go chill by the ocean, crack open a cold beer, and enjoy some oysters. One of the soldiers' eyes glazed over. He mimed the motion of grabbing a beer, but instead of a drink, his hand reached for the grenade on his belt. Hey, stop. What are you doing? Michael shouted, realizing something was wrong and rushing to intervene. But it was too late. The soldier had already pulled the pin. Cheers! Boom! The grenade exploded, engulfing the soldier in flames and sending shrapnel flying in every direction. The deadly fragments tore through the nearby soldiers, leaving a trail of carnage. These fragmentation grenades were no joke. Their destructive power was immense. But it wasn't over yet. More soldiers, their minds clouded by the black mist, began pulling out their grenades as well. Cheers! They raised their glasses together, and in a horrifying moment of unity, they detonated themselves. Boom! 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 A series of explosions ripped through the battlefield, sending rocks, shrapnel, and debris flying like a deadly storm. The chaos was overwhelming, and the once organized human forces were thrown into disarray. Michael thrust his hands forward. As an Earth-type awakener, he summoned a shield of solid earth that condensed in front of him, forming a thick, sturdy barrier to block the force of the explosion. The rest of the armed team scrambled for cover behind the armored vehicle, shielding themselves from the shrapnel. But even as they avoided physical harm, a creeping sense of dread spread among them. Just moments ago, one of their comrades, someone who had been fighting alongside them, had inexplicably taken their own life. It was chilling. That kind of ability, the power to kill without leaving a trace, was the stuff of nightmares. Michael's brow furrowed deeply. He had already pieced it together. They were under some form of mind control. Evan, activate a mental barrier and locate the enemy, he ordered, his voice steady but tense. Got it. Evan nodded firmly. As a mind-type awakener, Evan closed his eyes for a brief moment. With a single thought, a mental barrier expanded outward, cutting through the oppressive black mist that surrounded them. Within seconds, he pinpointed the source of the attack. "There! I found it! Up above!" he shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Everyone followed his gaze and looked up. On the third-floor windowsill of a nearby building, they spotted it, a massive pitch-black rat crouched there, its fur matted and oily. But what made their stomachs churn was its face. It had the grotesque, hairy face of a human. "Damn it! There really are some freaky monsters out here." But just as the words left his mouth, a zombie leapt from the top of a high-rise, landing squarely on the shoulders of one of the armed soldiers. This wasn't just any zombie. It was one of the red-faced Zombie King's top enforcers, the king of agile zombies, nicknamed Monkey. Monkey's body was muscular, covered in grotesque, pus-filled boils. With a swift motion, it wrapped its arms around the soldier's neck and twisted. The sickening crack of bone echoed as the soldier's head was ripped clean off. "Attack! Now!" someone shouted. The surrounding soldiers scrambled to retaliate, but Monkey was too fast. With another powerful leap, it landed on the back of the Doom Hunter, a massive, heavily armed mech-like unit designed for zombie extermination. The Doom Hunter staggered under the sudden assault, its movements jerky and unstable. And then it happened. The Gatling gun mounted on its right arm misfired. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. A hail of bullets sprayed out, tearing through the ranks of the armed personnel. "Take cover!" someone screamed. The soldiers dove behind an armored vehicle as bullets ricocheted off its surface, sparks flying everywhere. But not everyone was lucky. A few unlucky souls were caught in the crossfire, their bodies shredded by the gunfire, exploding into bloody chunks. With the arrival of the zombie elites, the tide of battle was turning against the humans. And then, the red-faced Zombie King made its move. Raising one grotesque arm, its muscles swelled to an unnatural size, veins bulging and writhing like living snakes. Those veins shot out, snaking through the air and wrapping around several soldiers. The veins pierced their bodies. "Ark!" The soldiers screamed in agony as their bodies shriveled up, their blood drained in seconds. What was left of them collapsed to the ground, nothing more than dried-out husks. "So strong," Michael muttered, his sharp eyes fixed on the red-faced Zombie King. Its grotesque attack reminded him of a movie he'd seen, Venom. Still, he thought, at least this ability wasn't completely out of the ordinary. It was horrifying, sure, but it didn't qualify as something from the Phantom-infected category. Not yet. As the red-faced Zombie King's veins lashed out, claiming more lives, Michael stomped his foot hard against the ground. In an instant, several oval-shaped earthen walls erupted from the ground, forming a barrier that blocked the king's attacks. "Captain, the horde's breaking through," someone shouted from nearby. Without the suppressive fire from the Doom Hunter, the massive zombie horde was surging forward, closing the gap. "I know," Michael snapped, glancing over his shoulder. This whole situation felt like a twisted game of whack-a-mole. No matter how many zombies they took down, more just kept coming. He was barely keeping up. But then, one of their heavy hitters stepped forward. Xander, a towering man with a commanding presence. Xander was an awakener with lightning-based powers. His body crackled with electricity, arcs of lightning dancing across his skin. Even his hair stood on end, charged with raw energy. The air around him grew heavy with power, the tension almost suffocating. "Die!" Xander roared, slamming his fist into the ground. Boom! The earth cracked like a spiderweb, lightning surging outward in all directions. Within a 60-foot radius, the ground was engulfed in a storm of electricity. Zombies caught in the blast convulsed violently, smoke rising from their charred bodies as they were reduced to ash. "Captain, this isn't sustainable," Xander called out, turning back to Michael. "We're going to get worn down at this rate." Awakeners were powerful, but their energy wasn't limitless. Xander, along with the other key fighters, was already showing signs of exhaustion. Their faces were pale, their movements slower. They were running on fumes. Michael clenched his jaw. "Yeah, I know. These zombies didn't just show up out of nowhere. They're from somewhere else, and their strength is on par with a 3-star zombie nest." He had already pieced it together. Something bigger was at play here. Wow, what the hell? The female awakener's face turned pale as a sheet. She hadn't expected her first mission to turn into this kind of nightmare. Why are they even here? She stammered. How the hell should I know? Michael snapped, his frustration boiling over. The zombies from the one-star nest haven't even shown up yet. The group fell into an uneasy silence. They'd been thrown into a crisis out of nowhere. And to make matters worse, their actual mission target, the one-star zombie nest, was still untouched. Not even a scratch. Well, if there's a silver lining, Michael said, trying to keep his composure, it's that the zombies from the one-star nest staying put makes it easier for us to break through. Yeah, the others nodded in agreement. Things were bad enough already. If those zombies joined the fight, they'd be completely screwed. Evan tried to lighten the mood. Relax, everyone. Those zombies are dumb as bricks. We're practically knocking on their front door, and they're still not moving. They're probably not coming out. Meanwhile, on a rooftop overlooking the battlefield, Ethan stood with a calm, almost leisurely expression. Around him perched a flock of crows, buddy crows, as they were called, waiting for scraps like freeloaders. Thanks for waiting, everyone, Ethan said, his voice low and smooth. Is the water boiling yet? One of the crows asked, its eyes glowing red with excitement. It is, Ethan replied with a nod. Down below, the battlefield was in chaos. The armed personnel were running low on ammo, and the awakeners were visibly exhausted, their energy nearly depleted. The once massive horde of 20,000 zombies had been reduced to a ragged, scattered few. It's our turn now, Ethan said, his voice carrying a chilling finality. At his command, the thousands of zombies still standing suddenly roared to life, their bloodlust filling the air. Roar! Leading the charge was Bulldozer, a hulking brute of a zombie. With a thunderous roar, he barreled forward like a runaway freight train, his massive footsteps shaking the ground. Behind him, the elite zombies surged forward like a pack of wild animals unleashed from their chains. But the most eager of them all was Laura. The moment Ethan gave the order, she could barely contain herself. She'd been itching to join the slaughter, her bloodlust simmering as she watched the carnage unfold earlier. Now, she was ready to play with the humans. Hee. Laura's grin stretched unnaturally wide, almost splitting her face in two. With a flash of movement, her figure blurred, vanishing like a shadow as she darted toward the battlefield. Above, the rooftop erupted into chaos as the crows took flight, their black wings blotting out the sky. In the center of the swirling flock stood Ethan, his cold, sharp gaze fixed on the battlefield below. His crimson eyes glowed briefly, and then, in an instant, he vanished. Bulldozer was the first to crash into the battlefield. His massive frame plowed through the remaining zombies like a wrecking ball, sending bodies flying in every direction. Some zombies were even impaled on streetlights, left dangling like grotesque ornaments. With his sheer brute force, Bulldozer tore a gaping hole through the zombie horde. Behind him, the elite zombies moved with terrifying precision, pouncing on their prey. Their razor-sharp teeth tore through flesh and bone, snapping necks with ease. After tossing aside the severed heads of their victims, they immediately moved on to their next targets. Wait, what the hell is that? Michael and the others had felt the tremors before they saw it. Turning toward the source, they spotted the massive figure of Bulldozer tearing through the battlefield, heading straight for their position. Shit, they're coming out, Michael shouted, his voice tinged with panic. The group's faces went pale. The female awakener's voice trembled. Evan, didn't you say they wouldn't come out? Evan stammered, completely at a loss for words. The situation had turned on him so fast, he didn't even know how to respond. Was this just bad luck? Or something worse? The team's already dire situation had just gone from bad to worse. But as they quickly realized, this wasn't just worse. This was a whole new level of disaster. Bulldozer's massive frame was now barreling toward the human defenses. The ground shook violently with each step, the sheer force of his charge sending shockwaves through the air. His presence alone was overwhelming, a terrifying display of raw power. "We have to stop him," Michael shouted, snapping the team out of their daze. The armed personnel opened fire, their bullets pelting Bulldozer's thick, leathery hide. But it was no use. His skin was like armor, and the bullets barely left a scratch. If anything, the onslaught only seemed to make him angrier. He roared and picked up speed, charging even faster. "Let me handle this," the female awakener said, her brow furrowing in concentration. Her ability was metal manipulation, and with a wave of her hand, she sent a heavy armored vehicle skidding into Bulldozer's path. Boom! The collision was deafening. The armored vehicle was sent spinning through the air like a toy, flipping several times before crashing far off in the distance. The team stared in shock. Holy crap, he's that strong. The zombie was unbelievably strong, like a humanoid beast straight out of a nightmare. Even so, the weight of the armored vehicle managed to slow Bulldozer down a little. But before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, a slender figure appeared behind Bulldozer. Her face twisted into a sinister smile, terrifying to behold, as she charged forward at an inhuman speed. Laura had evolved significantly. She had already formed a crystal core and awakened her ability, Phantom Dash. When her speed reached a critical threshold, she could enter a state of invisibility. This eerie ability allowed her to approach her targets without a sound, completely undetected. One of the armed soldiers was firing ahead, his focus locked on the charging zombie. But as the female zombie closed the distance, her speed increased dramatically. In the blink of an eye, she vanished. Huh, where'd she go? The soldier froze, his target suddenly gone. He frantically scanned his surroundings, trying to locate the horrifying figure. And then, in the next moment, a grotesque, grinning face appeared right in front of him, so close their noses were nearly touching. Wah! The man's eyes widened in terror as he instinctively tried to back away. But Laura's razor-sharp bone claws sliced through his neck like a knife through butter. With a swift flick of her wrist, his head was sent flying, landing far away with a sickening thud. "She's here! She's coming!" The nearby soldiers panicked, their faces pale with fear. Among them was an awakener in the neurocore stage, who reacted the fastest. He gripped his alloy steel blade tightly and charged at Laura with a roar. Laura's figure blurred and disappeared again. When she reappeared, she was already behind the awakener. With a sickening squelch, her claws plunged into his lower back. In one brutal motion, she ripped out his kidney. Yeah, the awakener let out a blood-curdling scream before collapsing to the ground, convulsing in agony. "This is insane. She's a phantom infected. Run. Get out of here." The remaining soldiers, their will to fight completely shattered, turned and fled in terror. He. Laura let out a chilling, maniacal laugh as she chased after them. With every few steps, she brought another one down. Her claws, dripping with fresh blood, left a trail of crimson behind her. Her eyes gleamed with exhilaration, reveling in the thrill of the hunt. Michael and the other core team members noticed the chaos unfolding nearby. Even the Awakeners couldn't hold their ground against Laura. "We have to stop her. We can't let her keep slaughtering like this." "I'll handle it." Xander stepped forward, volunteering once again. He was confident that his lightning-based abilities would allow him to match her speed. Of the 500 armed personnel they had brought, 80% were already dead. Only about 100 remained. Electricity crackled around Xander, arcs of lightning dancing across his body as his energy surged violently. Just as he was about to confront Laura, a sudden, overwhelming pressure filled the air. From the distant street, it felt as though a tidal wave of blood was rushing toward them. Everyone froze, their hearts gripped by an instinctive fear. The oppressive aura was suffocating, a primal force that made their very souls tremble. The true king had arrived. Everyone turned to look, their eyes drawn to the figure standing in the middle of the street. It was a tall, slender young man dressed in a pristine white shirt, spotless despite the chaos around him. His expression was cold, his hollow eyes devoid of any emotion. The way he looked at them, it wasn't like he was looking at people. It was as if he were staring at corpses. What is that? Is it a zombie? A female awakener hesitated, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Michael's frown deepened as he studied the figure. Yeah, I've never seen a zombie like this before. My guess? He's the real zombie king. He feels dangerous, muttered Evan, a psychic awakener whose sharp instincts rarely failed him. The sudden appearance of yet another zombie king only heightened the tension. It felt like they were being dragged deeper into an abyss, step by step. Xander, however, was growing impatient. He knew that if they didn't start taking down some of these zombie kings, their situation would only get worse. His frustration boiled over. Then I'll take care of you first, Xander growled, abandoning his pursuit of Laura and charging straight at the young man, Ethan. As a lightning-type awakener, Xander's speed was incredible. Electricity crackled around him, his body a blur as he shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Michael didn't stop him. When it came to raw offensive power, Xander was the strongest in their group. He was the blade of their Operation King Hunt team. But what happened next left everyone completely stunned. The moment Xander got close to Ethan, his speed suddenly dropped. It was as if he had run straight into quicksand. His movements became sluggish, his body heavy and unresponsive. Damn it, Xander's in danger. Michael's instincts kicked in, and he immediately began thinking of ways to provide support. But it was already too late. Ethan's domain of the dead had enveloped Xander. As Xander struggled to move, Ethan casually walked past him. Without even breaking stride, Ethan reached out and plunged his hand into Xander's skull, pulling out a glowing white crystal core. The ease with which he did it was chilling. It was like someone casually picking up an apple from a coffee table as they walked by. Xander's eyes widened in shock, his pupils dilating as the light faded from them. His face froze in an expression of disbelief and terror. A moment later, his lifeless body crumpled to the ground behind Ethan. Before anyone could react, a pack of elite zombies swarmed Xander's corpse, tearing it apart and devouring it in seconds. Oh my God! Michael and the others were frozen in place, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. They hadn't even seen how Ethan killed Xander. And Xander, their strongest attacker, was dead. This zombie was beyond terrifying. It's a phantom infected. This is a true phantom infected. Michael's face darkened, his heart sinking into despair. The others were equally shaken. Fear spread like wildfire among them. Are we all going to die here? The female awakener asked, her voice trembling, tears welling up in her eyes. Michael quickly tried to calm her down. No, if we can figure out his abilities, we might still have a chance to survive. But we can't stay out here. We need to find cover now. Agreed. The group immediately moved toward a nearby building. The female awakener used her metal manipulation ability to bend the steel reinforcements in the walls, creating a large hole for them to enter. The three of them quickly climbed inside, followed by a few other neurocore stage awakeners and about a dozen armed soldiers. Outside, the remaining 100 soldiers were still fighting, but there was no time to wait for them. We can't worry about them now, Michael said firmly, his eyes hard. He had already decided to leave them behind. The female awakener didn't argue. She used her ability again to seal the hole in the wall, bending the steel back into place. Michael, still uneasy, used his earth-based powers to reinforce the walls further. Layers of sand and stone piled up, thickening the walls until they were nearly 30 feet thick. Every door, window, and crack was sealed tight. The building had become a fortress, cutting them off from the chaos outside. For a moment, the group finally felt a sliver of safety. The noise of the battlefield faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. Phew! Everyone let out a collective sigh of relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, they could breathe. The armed soldiers who had made it inside felt especially lucky. They knew that if they had been left outside, their fate would have been sealed. But as they enjoyed this brief moment of peace, the scene outside turned into a slaughterhouse. The soldiers who had been left behind continued to fight, but their efforts were futile. Some of them suddenly realized that the awakeners were gone. They abandoned us. What do we do now? Two soldiers exchanged panicked glances, their faces pale. Before they could come up with a plan, a pack of elite zombies descended on them, tearing them apart. Blood sprayed everywhere as their screams filled the air. The street was filled with the sounds of agony and despair. The soldiers had no way out, no chance of survival. They were trapped in this hellish nightmare, overwhelmed by a crushing sense of helplessness. All they could do was wait for death to claim them, lost and broken in this brutal apocalypse. However, Laura quickly showed them some love, putting an end to their suffering. One by one, the bodies dropped to the ground. This was the price of invasion. In just a couple of minutes, over 100 humans were wiped out, devoured by the zombies. With the humans in the middle taken care of, the red-faced zombie king and his crew finally came face to face with Ethan. Roar! The red-faced zombie king was absolutely furious. The losses today had been catastrophic, and now, at last, Ethan was standing right in front of him. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes burn with rage. The remaining zombies under the red-faced king followed his lead, letting out deafening roars. For a moment, the air was filled with the thunderous cries of the undead. The scene was overwhelming, a clash of titanic forces about to erupt. The battle was on the verge of exploding. Of course, Bulldozer, Laura, and the rest of Ethan's elite zombies weren't the type to get angry at a challenge. If anything, they were thrilled. They lived for this kind of fight. Go have some fun, Ethan said with a smirk. At his command, his crew charged forward without hesitation. The two zombie hordes sprinted at full speed, colliding like two tidal waves crashing into each other. But Ethan's crew was far too powerful, like professional football players plowing through a group of amateurs. The moment they clashed, the opposing zombies were sent flying, their bodies scattering like bowling pins. Bulldozer, in particular, was in his element. He loved this kind of chaos. Charging through the enemy ranks, he smashed through them like a wrecking ball, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Meanwhile, perched on top of a nearby high-rise, the red-faced zombie king Scarf, a grotesque creature called the human-faced rat, let out a series of high-pitched screeches. It had spotted the one who killed its mate, and its heart burned with hatred. The human-faced rat unleashed its eerie ability, mind control. A faint black mist began to spread, drifting toward Bulldozer, Laura, and the other zombies. But in a nearby alley, the PhD zombie was watching everything unfold. His sharp, calculating eyes were locked onto the human-faced rat. Unlike Bulldozer, who relied on brute strength, the PhD was cunning and methodical. The PhD had recently awakened a new ability, Mind Spike. He hadn't had a chance to use it yet in this battle, but now he saw his opportunity. As the human-faced rat's mental energy spread out, trying to control others, the PhD focused his own power. With a sudden burst of concentration, he struck. Crack! His mental energy transformed into a sharp spike, stabbing directly into the human-faced rat's mind. Screech! The human-faced rat let out a blood-curdling scream as its brain was racked with searing pain. It collapsed onto its back, its limbs twitching uncontrollably, foam bubbling from its mouth. Whether it was dead or alive was anyone's guess. My scarf! The red-faced zombie king roared in fury. He was starting to realize that his side was no match for Ethan's crew. Their level of evolution was simply too high. One of his top lieutenants, a nimble zombie nicknamed Monkey, leapt on a bulldozer's back, baring its sharp teeth as it tried to bite into his skull. But Bulldozer wasn't having any of it. He reached back with one massive hand, grabbed Monkey by the upper jaw, and yanked its mouth open. Then, with a roar, he slammed Monkey into the ground with a brutal over-the-shoulder throw. You think you can bite my head? Bulldozer growled, his voice dripping with disdain. To make his point, he stomped on Monkey's body a couple more times for good measure. Ethan's crew tore through the opposing horde like a wrecking ball, leaving almost no casualties on their side. The red-faced zombie king was losing control, his frustration boiling over. You're all dead, he bellowed. He thrust his arms forward, and his muscles swelled grotesquely. Veins burst from his skin, writhing like countless tentacles, spreading across the street in a horrifying display. Several zombies were immediately impaled by the blood-soaked tendrils. But Ethan's crew didn't flinch. They charged forward, fearless, their jaws snapping down on the veins. Some of them were even more ferocious, ignoring the fact that they'd been impaled, continuing to fight with reckless abandon. They were like savage wolf pups. If they were going to die, they'd make sure to take a chunk out of their enemy first. Roar! Bulldozer let out a thunderous roar. Seeing his comrades skewered like kebabs was too much for him to bear. With a mighty leap, he closed the distance to the red-faced zombie king, raising his fist to strike. But despite his raw power, Bulldozer wasn't strong enough to take on the red-faced zombie king alone. Suddenly, the red-faced zombie's chest split open, and countless blood vessels surged out, wrapping tightly around Bulldozer. The tendrils pierced into his body, beginning to drain his flesh and blood. Bulldozer roared in pain, thrashing violently, but the blood vessels lifted him into the air, his feet dangling helplessly. He couldn't muster any strength to fight back. "All of you die," the red-faced zombie bellowed. As it absorbed more of Bulldozer's blood, its skin turned an even deeper shade of crimson. Veins bulged grotesquely across its face, making it look even more terrifying. But just as it was reveling in its dominance, something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, a dark cloud appeared in the sky. It wasn't a storm, it was a massive flock of crows. Their eerie cries echoed as their glowing red eyes glinted with malice. The crows dove down like missiles, their sharp beaks tearing into the blood vessels. Their beaks were like scissors, slicing through the tendrils with ease. Blood sprayed everywhere, filling the air with a nauseating stench. "Damn crows!" the red-faced zombie roared in frustration. Unable to withstand the relentless assault, it was forced to retract its blood vessels. The pain was unbearable, and its body trembled as the crows continued to peck at it. Freed from the blood vessels, Bulldozer dropped to the ground. He looked up and saw a familiar red-eyed crow among the flock. It was the same little blackbird he'd tried to catch earlier. Bulldozer couldn't believe it. The bird had come to help him. The little blackbird had repaid cruelty with kindness. Instead of holding a grudge for being chased, it had come to save his life. Bulldozer felt a wave of emotion swell in his chest. "Little blackbird, you're amazing. I swear, I'll never try to catch you again," he said, his voice full of gratitude. Big idiot, the crow squawked, flapping its wings as it flew away, just like it had the last time. Bulldozer stood there, speechless. With the help of the crows, the red-faced zombie had lost its trump card. It was furious but helpless. When it looked up, it realized it was completely surrounded. Ethan's elite zombies had closed in, their eyes gleaming with deadly intent. Each one was a powerhouse in its own right. "It's over," the red-faced zombie muttered, a sinking feeling of doom washing over it. Meanwhile, Ethan's figure flickered as he used his domain of the dead ability to phase through walls, entering the building where Michael and his group were hiding. The building had once been a hotel, but now it was a scene of utter devastation. Bloodstains marred the marble floors, a grim reminder of the chaos that had unfolded here. When the apocalypse hit, the hotel had been packed with people, making it one of the hardest-hit areas. Now, the walls of the hotel had been sealed off by Michael and his team using their abilities. The barriers were a staggering 30 feet thick. "Man, with powers like that, you should have gone into construction," Ethan thought to himself, amused. The space inside was completely sealed off, shrouded in darkness. Not a single ray of sunlight penetrated the thick walls. The only light came from a few tactical flashlights held by armed survivors, their beams flickering in the distance. Michael and his group were sitting on the ground, trying to catch their breath. "We need to recover some strength while we can," Michael said, his voice calm but firm. "We burned through too much energy earlier." "Yeah," Evan agreed, nodding. "Hiding in here was the right call. At least the zombies can't get in." "We've got time," Evan added. But man, blocking the human-faced rat's mind control earlier, I feel like it drained my soul. Evan, just stop talking, one of the women in the group said, her voice trembling with worry. She was an awakener, but her face was pale, her expression filled with dread. She couldn't shake the memory of what had happened earlier. The Zombie King's abilities were beyond anything they'd ever encountered. In just a single moment, it had killed Xander effortlessly, as if it were taking a casual stroll. She had read reports about Phantom infected before. The data was clear. Even Awakeners had an 80% mortality rate when facing one. Who the hell collected the intel on this place? She snapped, her voice breaking. How could they classify this as a one-star zombie nest? Her emotions were spiraling out of control, the fear and despair overwhelming her. This time, the intel was definitely wrong. With the Zombie King's bizarre abilities, this mission should have been rated at least 4 or 5 stars in difficulty. Michael said, his brows furrowed. Even now, thinking back to what had happened earlier, he couldn't shake the lingering fear. That tall, slender figure, it was utterly terrifying. Faced with such a hopeless situation, the female awakener couldn't hold back her tears. Her voice trembled as she choked out, I don't want to die yet. It's okay. At least we're safe for now. Let's rest up a bit, and Evan started to comfort her, but his words suddenly trailed off. A heavy sense of foreboding crept over him. As a psychic-type awakener, his sensitivity to danger was far sharper than most. And right now, he felt it. Something was approaching them. Evan's body tensed as if he were sitting on needles. A chill ran down his spine. Instinctively, he turned to look behind him, but all he saw was darkness. Nothing was there. Evan, what's wrong? Michael asked, noticing his strange behavior. Evan's brows knitted tightly. I think something's here. What? The others froze, their faces filled with disbelief. Evan, don't scare me like that. Yeah. The walls are so thick and they're reinforced. There's no way anything could get in. Didn't we just say this place was safe? The group murmured nervously among themselves. I'm not sure, Evan said, rubbing his temples. Maybe I overexerted myself earlier. My nerves are probably just too wound up. It wasn't impossible. When someone was under extreme stress, hallucinations weren't uncommon. Maybe his instincts were just off this time. But just as Evan turned his head back, a tall, slender figure materialized behind him out of thin air. Its white shirt was pristine, its expression cold and emotionless, like the grim Reaper himself. Michael and the female awakener, sitting directly across from Evan, saw it first. Their eyes widened in sheer horror, as if they'd just seen a ghost. Their faces twisted in disbelief, and for a moment, they even questioned their own sanity. He's here, the female awakener stammered, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Evan frowned, confused. Who? But before he could finish the question, he realized something was wrong. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the space behind him, their faces pale with terror. There really was something there. A suffocating sense of danger surged through him again. He could feel the cold breath of death on his neck. He didn't dare turn around, afraid that doing so would seal his fate. But he couldn't stop himself. The urge to look was overwhelming. Slowly, he turned his head, only to feel a massive hand clamp down on the top of his skull. The hand pierced through his head effortlessly, extracting his crystal core in one swift motion. Thud! Evan's body collapsed to the ground as he turned, lifeless. In his final moments, he caught a glimpse of that pristine white shirt. The figure of death had truly arrived. And with his last thought, a chilling realization struck him. Everyone here is going to die. Michael's eyes were wide with shock, his entire body frozen. He had hunted zombie kings before, but he had never seen anything like this. The sheer brutality of the kill, the way the figure moved, it sent shivers down his spine. What made it worse was the impossibility of it all. The walls around them were reinforced, impenetrable. Yet somehow, this thing had slipped in without a sound. A deep, unsettling dread settled in his heart. This was a true phantom infected. The female awakener's face turned deathly pale as she stared at Ethan's figure, her body trembling uncontrollably. Fear gripped her so tightly that she couldn't even move. "This graveyard, not bad," Ethan said, his cold gaze sweeping across the room. Michael wasn't about to sit there and wait to die. "Fire! Open fire!" he shouted. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. The armed personnel pulled their triggers, the muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness as a storm of bullets rained down on Ethan. But Ethan's body shimmered with a faint red glow, and in the next moment, it was as if he had turned into a phantom. The bullets passed straight through him, slamming harmlessly into the reinforced walls behind him. What the? The group was paralyzed with fear. Their hearts sank as they realized the truth. This phantom infected was no ordinary enemy. Their weapons were completely useless. A wave of despair washed over them. Still, they kept firing, the deafening roar of gunfire echoing through the space. It wasn't just an attack on Ethan anymore. It was their final act of defiance against the cruelty of this world. Why is it like this? But before they could even process their hopelessness, Ethan unleashed his domain of the dead. The oppressive energy spread out, blanketing the entire area. The gunfire abruptly stopped. The armed personnel, mere humans with no special abilities, couldn't withstand the overwhelming pressure. Their bodies burst apart like overripe watermelons, one after another, leaving nothing but blood and gore in their wake. It was a massacre. Michael and the female awakener, already drained from their earlier battles, were no exception. The domain of the dead pressed down on them like an unrelenting tide, leaving them in excruciating pain. The female awakener gritted her teeth, her mind racing. Facing a phantom infected like this, the odds of survival weren't just 80% against them. It was more like 99.99999%. "Die!" she screamed, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth as she pushed her body past its limits, unleashing the last of her energy. From the reinforced walls around them, countless steel rods shot out like arrows, slicing through the air and converging on Ethan from all directions. These rods weren't ordinary. They were infused with the energy of her crystal core. Ethan didn't take them head-on. With a casual wave of his hand, the power of the domain of the dead condensed, sending the steel rods flying in all directions. In the blink of an eye, Ethan appeared in front of the female awakener. Her eyes filled with despair as she watched him reach out and effortlessly extract her crystal core. Her body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. As her consciousness faded, one final thought crossed her mind. Who the hell gathered the intel for this mission? They called this a one-star zombie nest? I hope that intel officer runs into zombies like this every damn day. With the female awakener's death, the Operation King Hunt Squad was almost entirely wiped out. Only Michael remained. But Michael's will to survive was strong. Seizing the brief moment when the power of the domain of the dead dispersed slightly, he unleashed the last of his energy. Armor of Earth. With a single thought, the dirt and debris from the surrounding walls surged toward him, wrapping around his body. In an instant, he transformed into a towering earth giant. Now standing over 10 feet tall, Michael's body was covered in thick, rock-like armor. His massive arms were as thick as a grown man's waist, radiating raw power. Under the crushing pressure of the domain of the dead, Michael forced himself to move. He raised one of his massive arms and swung it at Ethan with all his might, the sound of the air splitting under the force of his punch echoing through the room. Ethan didn't dodge. Instead, he raised his own fist and met Michael's attack head-on. This opponent was a little interesting, so Ethan decided to use 80% of his strength. In the darkness, the sound of a sonic boom tore through the air as Ethan's iron fist shot forward like a dragon breaking free from its chains, unstoppable and devastating. Boom! The moment their fists collided, it was like two mountains crashing into each other. The deafening impact reverberated through the space, followed by the sharp sound of cracking. Michael's earth-armored fist, which had seemed so indestructible, began to fracture. Spiderweb-like cracks spread across it, and chunks of the armor started to fall away. In mere moments, the armor on his arm shattered completely, revealing his real arm underneath. It hung limp at his side, completely numb and useless. So strong. Michael muttered through gritted teeth, his face twisted in pain. His heart sank further as he realized the truth. This zombie king wasn't just bizarrely powerful. It was physically unstoppable. It was an enemy without weakness. Ethan analyzed the situation calmly. Among all the Awakeners he had hunted, Michael was probably the strongest. An Earth-based ability, both offensive and defensive. But it was time to end this. With a single thought, Ethan expanded his absolute domain to its limit. The overwhelming pressure crashed down on Michael, making his body feel like it was being crushed. He staggered, nearly collapsing to the ground. His body was completely spent. He had reached his limit. Ethan moved in a flash, appearing right in front of Michael. He raised his fist and slammed it into Michael's chest. Boom! The impact shattered the dirt armor surrounding Michael, sending him flying backward. He crashed through the wall behind him and was thrown outside the building. Cough! Cough, cough! Michael lay on the ground, coughing up blood. He couldn't get back up. The bright light outside felt unbearably harsh to his eyes. A horde of zombies was already closing in on him. Among them was Bulldozer, casually tossing a severed head in his right hand like a ball. It was the head of the red-faced zombie king. Beside him stood Laura, her sharp bone claws still dripping with fresh blood. She tilted her head, a sinister smile on her face, as she studied the man lying on the ground. Behind them was a massive crowd of elite zombies, over 1,000 strong. They had just defeated the red-faced zombie king, and the thrill of the slaughter still lingered in their minds. So, this is how it ends, huh? Michael stared at the grotesque faces surrounding him, his vision growing blurrier by the second. He had always known this day would come. He just hadn't expected it to be so soon. Soon, he would leave this cruel world behind. From now on, none of it would matter to him anymore. A faint sense of relief crossed Michael's face. Might as well say goodbye properly. Ethan stepped forward, looking down at him. He noticed the complicated emotions in Michael's eyes. Fear, regret, but also a strange sense of peace. Got any last words? Ethan asked. Michael froze for a moment. He hadn't expected a zombie to speak, let alone in such a deep, magnetic voice. It was nothing like the cold, ruthless killer he had just faced. For a brief moment, Michael had the strange illusion that the figure standing before him was human. Cough, cough. Kid, I know you're strong, but don't get cocky. Genesis Biotech, they're not as simple as you think. They got a lot of secret project stuff they'd never make public. That's where the real danger is. Ethan nodded slightly. He had already suspected as much. The real trump cards wouldn't be something they'd broadcast online. Plans like the Zombie Eradication Initiative or Operation King Hunt were just for show to build public trust. Michael's eyes grew more unfocused. He started muttering something under his breath. Phantom infected. Phantom infected. They're feeding the zombies, breeding phantom infected. A cold wind blew past. Michael's pupils dilated. He was dead. The area fell silent. Even Bulldozer stopped playing with the severed head. He turned to the PhD zombie standing nearby and whispered, "What do you think the human was talking about?" With your level of intelligence, I'm not sure how to explain it to you," the PhD zombie replied thoughtfully. "Oh," Bulldozer nodded, pretending to understand. But after a moment, he frowned. Something didn't feel right. Wait, was he calling me stupid? Laura and the others walked over to Ethan, glancing at Michael's lifeless body. "Master, I think the human made a good point before he died," Laura said. "A dying man speaks the truth," Ethan replied. The surrounding zombies, with their limited intelligence, couldn't quite grasp the meaning of his words, especially Bulldozer. But his curiosity was insatiable. "Hey, boss, what does that mean?" "It means if a human's being difficult, beat them until they're almost dead. Then they'll start talking sense." "Oh, I get it now." This time, Bulldozer understood. He felt like he had learned something profound and immediately treated it as a golden rule. As expected of the boss, everything he says makes so much sense. Bulldozer shot a disdainful glance at the PhD zombie beside him, as if to say, "If you can't explain it to me, Maybe it's your intelligence that's the problem. With that, the battle came to an end. The streets were littered with mangled flesh and severed limbs. The scene was one of utter devastation, chaos stretching as far as the eye could see. A flock of black crows cawed noisily as they pecked at the scattered remains. For scavengers, even zombie flesh seemed to be a delicacy. "Let's go. Time to head back," Ethan commanded. Rayard, the horde of zombies behind him, let out triumphant roars. Victorious from the battle, they were like soldiers returning from a hard-fought war, their spirits high. They had taken down the red-faced zombie king, and with his defeat, their territory had expanded significantly. From the skyscraper to the park, their domain had tripled in size. The battle had also been a huge haul for Ethan. He'd collected 6 crystal cores, a massive reward. Over the next few days, Ethan stayed holed up in his base, as usual. He absorbed the crystal cores, ate meat, drank blood, and continuously replenished his energy reserves. Meanwhile, Bulldozer, Laura, and the PhD zombie had been unusually busy. With the territory now much larger, the 3 zombie leaders had recruited a significant number of new underlings. Their forces had grown from 2,000 to over 10,000 in just a few days, and the numbers were still climbing. Ethan had officially become the zombie king, ruling over a horde of tens of thousands. But to Ethan, it still wasn't enough. If he could multiply that number by 100, then it might be barely acceptable. That said, the newly recruited underlings weren't exactly elite. They were stationed on the outskirts of the territory, serving as a disposable outer defense. The original 2,000 elite zombies, however, remained stationed around the skyscraper. They were Ethan's personal guard corps. Life in the expanded territory. No one was happier about the expansion than Bulldozer. He spent his days wandering the streets, patrolling the area like a self-appointed neighborhood watch. He'd look for intruders or anything that might have snuck into their territory. On lucky days, he'd even catch a few human survivors to snack on. Life was good for him, simple and satisfying. If his underlings were living the good life, Ethan was living even better. After that battle, no one dared to provoke him anymore. And without realizing it, Ethan had become a nightmare for humanity. Meanwhile, on Genesis Biotech's website, the photos of Michael and his team had all turned grayscale, a grim marker indicating that the entire Operation King Hunt squad had been wiped out. Since Genesis Biotech had launched its anti-zombie operations, casualties were common. But a complete squad wipe? That was a first. The incident drew widespread attention. Michael was a B+ level awakener, and he still got killed by a zombie. That's brutal. The whole squad's gone. I wonder what they ran into out there. Phantom infected, obviously. I heard a drone even caught a photo of it. Seriously? Ethan scrolled through the comments and found that there really was a photo. It wasn't very clear, taken from a great distance, but it showed a lone figure standing on the edge of a skyscraper rooftop. A flock of crows circled around him. The image had a dark, ominous vibe. The comments on the photo had already surpassed the discussion about the Operation King Hunt Squad's demise. Whoa, is that really a zombie? This feels so oppressive. It's just too blurry, and the crows are blocking his face. This isn't just any zombie. That's a phantom infected. Who knows how many people it's slaughtered? Okay, but is it weird that I think he looks kind of cool? Wait, Sam. Why does he look so badass?